I believe you DM'd me and said something to the effect of, I'm going to learn MMT just so I can prove you wrong. I mean, I understand there are a lot of people that hate the federal government and they hate the Fed, but asking for their opinion on how we should run the economy or American finance is the equivalent of asking a bunch of communists who hate the fucking cops and tattoo ACAB on their arm how we should run law enforcement. It's just, they're not even part of the conversation here. All right, Become the Night has joined the stream and he's on camera too. You can't see me, but I can see you, and I'm gonna put you in the show too.
In the show. Hey now, Become the Night.
Sounds good. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Had to re-record an entire video that had no audio on it this morning.
Ow,
so it was
How long was the video?
It was like 40 minutes worth of footage.
Ouch.
Yeah,
I hate that. Wrong. It's not the wrong mic setup, or
so sometimes when I'm live streaming, I will have to go into my DAW, my digital audio workspace, and switch the engine, the audio engine, so that people can actually hear what I'm working on. And I forgot to switch it back to record on my microphone. So
that sucks.
It sucked bad.
That's
so bad. I believe. I guess I have a DM from you here. I believe you DM'd me and said something to the effect of, I'm going to learn MMT just so I can prove you wrong.
You know what? That is exactly the reason you should learn MMT. Okay.
Something to that degree. Yeah.
Which is, I think you might have the order wrong there. I think normally you learn something and then discover whether or not it proves people wrong.
Well, listen, Adam. As I told you, I literally listened to Stephanie Kelton's book only to argue with people about MMT. I had no interest in the subject until we could argue about it. Okay.
Well, but you wanted to prove people wrong. But listen, I'm saying there's a factual problem here. He wants to prove MMT wrong.
So you're not wrong in the sense of, like, you should never seek knowledge with an end goal in mind of trying to win for your tribe. I fully agree with that. More specifically, just listening to a bunch of the talks that you had with a few other people, it really just kind of rubbed me as this kind of inherently is a societal manipulation type of point of view.
Yes,
you know,
it is.
That's right. Yeah, and I'm not a fan of that. You know, I'm not really a fan of that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
eating and drinking water and needing to breathe air is a manipulation, is a reality manipulation that, you know, a lot of people are not necessarily uncomfortable with too. But we're all big boys here.
How do you rectify the basic human functions to survive biologically as a societal manipulation?
No, I said a reality manipulation. So in order for us to live, in order for life to be possible, we have these things that have evolved: respiration, food, water.
Wait. Can we pause for a second?
Resources we need.
Let's pause for a second.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Become the Night. Tell everyone who you are first of all. And tell everyone what we're talking about today, because I don't even know what's going on here. Okay.
Sorry.
Before we jump into the conversation.
My name's Become the Night, also known as Mike the Music Snob. I've been doing YouTube for a while, and I guess I describe my channel as I talk a lot about music, or rather, I bitch a lot about music, and I play it every once in a while. But yeah, I'm really into prog rock, metal, but I listen to everything, you know.
Nice. You have a kind of a big channel too, don't you? I mean, I think you have a lot of. You're like over 100K subscribers. I don't have a channel with over 100K.
182K.
Right? Yeah. There you go. Yeah, that's awesome.
Beat me and Adam's main channels that we don't upload to anymore. But
yeah, but your guys' numbers fucking spank mine right now. I'm not even sure why that is, frankly. Like
Because
my
we're
channel,
awesome. What do you mean? Oh,
I mean, okay,
you're
so,
right.
I mean,
I see.
besides that, I was talking
I
about
see.
why I'm sucking right now,
Gotcha.
not why you
I'm
guys
sorry.
are doing good. No, you guys
Right.
kick ass.
Thank
I'm
you.
definitely a big fan for sure.
Cool. You
Okay,
know,
and we're talking about MMT today,
as soon as we
Yes.
not
decided,
music.
as soon as we decided we were going to talk about MMT regularly, that's when our numbers really, really started to skyrocket.
Oh
So-
yes,
That's
everyone's
all.
very
That's also.
excited. Yes.
That's also why I feel kind of bad about this, because like you have this massive fucking SCOTUS news, and there's like 1,000 other things to talk about in the culture war, and
No,
we're just
it's-
about to
listen,
dive deep into economics.
No
like
one gives a
fucking
fuck.
nerds.
Listen, we talked about this guy. I don't know what else we were going to say about this guy.
I know. And not only that, I don't want to talk about abortion. This is kind of a nightmare in my eyes because I don't feel like you can have a rational conversation about this kind of stuff because everyone is just so emotionally triggered by everything. So it's not really fun to talk about. This is not a fun thing to talk about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I guess
MMT is is a lot of fun to talk about.
yeah. It's like, do I have to fucking out my fucking abortion opinions right now? But no, fucking
You don't
no,
have
you
to.
don't.
Yeah, please don't. We don't want to know.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on from that. Yeah, so I guess a good starting point, in my opinion, might be you fundamentally don't believe MMT is prescriptive, right?
I believe you can derive prescriptions from MMT or derive prescriptions and assess whether or not those prescriptions will, what will happen if you implement those prescriptions via MMT. So MMT is a descriptive thing, but it does give you a lens to evaluate proscriptions. Like right now, a perfect example is Biden wants to forgive college loan debt. And in the situation right now where we have the economy is having massive inflation, we should be shrinking the money supply to curb that inflation. So if you subscribe to MMT, when the money supply expands two ways, via lending or spending. So when banks lend money, that expands the money supply. When the government spends money, that expands the money supply. If you have inflation, it means the money supply is too big. There's too much money out there competing for too few goods, and that's driving prices up.
That's one way of interpreting it. Yes, that's one form.
Hold on, what do you mean? That's just
wait.
That's classical economics. That's not MMT.
But apparently we have new listeners in the chat who don't know what MMT is, Adam. So do you want to give a
This
definition?
is mommy milkers theory. So
the Shapiro sister theory.
Yeah, there you go.
MMT stands for modern monetary theory. Sitch, will you give a brief description of modern monetary theory?
What the fuck is? I just said, Adam, will you give a definition? And he's like, Sitch, will you give a definition?
I'm busy right now. I was looking something up.
I don't even know how to modern.
And I was in the middle of
theory.
let me just finish my example and then I'll give a brief description. Okay.
Yeah.
So the money, we can argue on whether or not you think the money supply should shrink or grow.
Of course, yeah.
But if Joe Biden decides he's going to forgive college loan debt, that is going to not shrink the money supply. Most classical economists believe that during inflationary periods, you should shrink the money supply. That's the whole point of raising interest rates, is that you make money more expensive to get so people do not take out as many loans, and loans expand the money supply. So the prescription that Joe Biden is putting forward, I think, will cause more inflation through the MMT lens. But anyway, so MMT, modern monetary theory, is this idea that
I'm following you now on what you mean with the money supply. Gotcha. Okay.
So MMT is this idea that the classic way that people think about taxes, that we pay taxes and that those taxes pay for spending, is really not correct. I mean, it's a useful way to think about things, but really the government can spend money and buy anything people are willing to pay for in their currency, the Federal Reserve currency.
The taxed money is literally just taken out of circulation, whether that's
right.
destroyed or just stored somewhere.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
So
Gotcha.
the idea behind modern monetary theory is that we're really focusing so much on the deficit and how big the deficit is really a fool's errand. The constraint that you have in government spending is the inflation, because everyone hates inflation. You don't want inflation to get out of control, and what creates inflation is there being the money supply being too big for too few goods. There's like this balancing act that goes on. If you think of the economy as a huge supermarket with all of these different products and services, and you think of the money supply as a certain amount of money to buy all of those goods and services that the economy produces, if you have a large money supply, those goods and services are going to be more expensive. If you have a small money supply, those goods and services are going to be, oh shit, did I get it backwards?
No, you got it right.
Okay. If you have a smaller money supply, those goods and services are going to be cheaper because you're apportioning them out. There's like an apportionment thing going on.
When you have scarcity and create less of the medium of exchange, that makes its buying power worth more because it is valued higher because there's less of it.
Right. So this is so basic economics is not MMT. Like the idea behind supply and demand is not MMT at all. So if you have
obviously.
So if you have demand for products and services, the price of those products and services is often going to be affected by the money supply. Like a larger money supply, the prices are going to be higher. There's even like Warren Mosler says, government actually creates the price level for things just by what it decides to pay people in government jobs. So, and I've used this example on other live streams. Like if you pay a serviceman, a military worker, obviously there are all these government jobs. If you went out and doubled the amount you were going to pay all government workers, obviously that would create inflation and the price level would go up. If you went out and cut the wages for government jobs in half, obviously that would create deflation and that would force prices down. So, but
why would the government jobs increase or decrease inflation?
Well, I'm saying that the price level, the price of a hamburger, the price of a Coca-Cola, the origin of that price level is government spending.
Government spending,
right?
Maybe, especially the way that it's working today. I mean, yeah, you can definitely make that argument, or at very least, if it's not the origin of it, it has a large influence on it.
So is the argument that like because the government's so large and the government buys so much stuff, like whatever price the government's willing to pay for hamburgers is going to have such an effect that it's going to basically shape the rest of the market?
No, the argument is like I've heard other libertarians use this example for the price level, like starting a price system, and they use the example of a salesperson wants to sell apples or something like that, right? So what is the apple seller going to charge for his apples to some person that walks along? But really what they're leaving out of the equation is the person that walks along worked a job to get the money to buy the apples, okay? And the job that they worked, let's just say for the sake of example, that was a government job, okay? And the government paid them $5 for a day's worth of work, okay? Now, if the apple seller wants to sell his apples for $500, the apple buyer is probably going to scoff at that, right? Because he's earning $5 a day. He's not earning Like those apples
Yeah,
are pretty expensive.
This fits perfectly into the more Austrian side of looking at things. It's the subjective value, I guess principle would be the word
But
for it.
how does but the government, like why does the government, who can print as much money as they want to print, decide to pay the worker $5 a day? They could pay him $1,000 a day. They could pay him $10,000 a day.
That's the question for you. You're advocating running the printers, man. Fucking why don't they?
Well, the where the price level comes from is the person doing the math on what the value of their work is in apples. They're basically, I mean, the math is immaterial. If the government pays $10,000 a day or $5 a day, all that's going to do is set the price level. But the argument is it's going to be set about the same, because the guy's going to go, listen, I'm not going to work a month to buy an apple. I'm going to work 10 minutes to buy an apple. Right.
Okay. Real quick. I think we're missing a key part of this too. Obviously, something gets thrown out of whack with inflation, with the ratio of real wealth that consumers have versus what the pricing is. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter whether we print shitloads of money or suck it all back into the Fed and there's like $2 floating around. There's some type of ratio that I think where the argument really lies on, even from people debating MMT within your own community, on how much should be printed. There's some type of ratio there.
Right. Yeah, I don't think you're not arguing against that, Adam, right?
No, not at all. But I mean, it's
okay,
kind of,
so
it is kind of immaterial.
I want to make sure.
What makes it important is that people don't want to earn a bunch of money at one price level and spend a bunch of money at a much higher price level. That seems unfair. I mean, to everyone.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, but most people, this is why they don't keep their money in cash. They turn their money into some sort of investment vehicle. The whole idea behind the Austrian School of Economics is they want currency to be an investment vehicle, which it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why would you want that?
What do you mean by they want currency to be an investment vehicle?
Well, if currency is backed by gold, then when you hold currency, you're literally investing in gold.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about going back to the gold standard.
Well, they are talking about going to the gold standard.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I personally fall on that, honestly, especially with the rise of crypto. I don't know how necessary that is. I mean, at the end of the day, there's always some element of faith that goes into any type of currency, right? So I mean, does it absolutely need to be bound
there's not.
to something physical?
So now we've touched on something that is MMT.
Okay.
You don't need the whole idea that you need faith in the currency, I think, is naive, because the federal government creates demand for the currency through taxation.
Okay, we're going to fundamentally disagree on this as the nature of money, but okay.
How do we disagree?
At the end of the day, I mean, it comes down to the individual consumer. And I don't think when someone gets paid that $5 for their day's worth of work, they're thinking, man, thank fucking Christ, I got this $5 because I'm not going to die because I didn't pay my taxes. They're thinking, thank God I can feed my family because I know this dollar has purchasing power. And that's going to happen through faith that people want and value this medium of exchange, whether that's enforced through taxation or whether it's just a societal construct in and of itself. That value of this being valuable is, I should say, the faith of this being valuable happens regardless of taxation. That can emerge without having to coerce people.
I don't know that it does, because
okay, well, what's the origin of money?
You can look at the money, the Federal Reserve. It comes from the government. The government prints it.
No. I mean the technology money, not the origin of the dollar.
Well, there's conflicting. I mean, people have conflicting ideas on that. But I mean, I would classify myself as a chartalist. I believe money comes from the state, that the state creates money.
So based upon what I have seen thus far doing my own research, and it might not be the best research. I'll even admit that. I mean, they used shells as a form of currency way back when with, you know, ancient indigenous tribes and such. And, you know, what inherent value does a fucking shell have? You can't really use it for much. It just kind of looks pretty, right? Or even like, I remember you shitting on gold.
As soon as the state comes in and says, listen, we want these shells, you better give us some or we're going to throw your ass in jail. We're going to burn your house down. Then all of a sudden those shells are very valuable.
Okay, maybe they become more valuable, but they're valuable before anyone ever says, hey, I'm going to fucking rape and pillage you unless you give me those shells.
Well, wait, aren't my understanding, like the shells only have value. So my understanding is like the US dollar really only has value because people can use it to pay their taxes. And so wouldn't the shells only have value if whatever system of governance they have can be used to pay taxes or trade or whatever?
If people are using it for trade, that's the value that it has, is people are trading with it. There is inherent value because people know I can trade with this.
Right. But why would people accept it to be traded with in the first place, I guess?
Yeah, that's what I mean. And we don't know. I mean,
we do know
the whole,
that's the whole idea behind MMT.
What was I get that, but what was the state that was saying, hey, give me these fucking shells or I'm gonna burn your tent down?
It was your example. I don't know. You tell me.
That's what I'm saying, is like I don't think these ancient indigenous tribes had what we would consider taxation.
Well, they might not have, but is that relevant to today's economic model, I guess?
Yeah, I mean it's relevant in this. Okay, it's relevant in the sense of the whole prescriptive descriptive thing I'm talking about. I think inherently MMT not only says this is how it works today in our monetary system, but this is how it has always operated and should always operate. That's the prescriptive part that I don't like. I don't think this is an ought argument. I think this is healthily describing how it operates today. I'm fully on board with that. Like I wouldn't have any argument with Adam on that.
Do you know the purpose of the Federal Reserve?
Monetarism, basically just keeping control of the money supply, essentially.
But for what purpose?
To, well, it depends upon how cynical we want to get, but ideally,
well, you can give me this. You can give me the cynical version, and the non-cynical version.
To keep the my very, very cynical wage. I mean, I'm obviously exaggerating, but to keep the masses assuaged so that those in power can basically continue to increase the wealth gap. Honestly, again, it's extremely cynical of me. I understand that.
How does that? Tell me the technical aspects of that. How does the Fed do that?
Well, it's really more an arm of other elites who dictate spending policy. And
what is the purpose of dictating the spending policy, though?
What's the non-cynical? I think
the non-cynical version is ideally so that society can thrive and we can become more prosperous and further technology. All in service of the inherent value of human beings.
What is the mechanism though? The actual purpose. So hold on, Sitch.
I think. I think what Adam's asking is, what is the Fed's stated purpose?
Well, not.
What is the mechanism?
I don't know their.
Also, this is the thing. Like, if I ask you, what is the purpose of the police? Can you tell me the purpose of the police?
Protect and serve. Technically speaking, that's their motto.
Law enforcement.
Yeah, law enforcement.
Enforce the law.
Yeah.
But when I ask people, so there was a defund the police movement going around recently, which led me to believe there are a lot of people that don't understand the role of the police, or they think the role of the police is superfluous to the point where they think we could just get rid of police and people would just mind their own business. Like, people would naturally obey the law. People would just naturally do the right thing.
Now, I don't even need laws.
I know. I don't believe in a world like that. I think you need laws, and I think you need law enforcement to enforce those laws. Now, the Fed is another kind of cop. But I'm asking you for these answers, and you're kind of leading me to believe that you don't really even know what the Fed does.
The Fed's not the cop. As far, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the SEC was more the cop, and the Fed is more the person who decides to pour more gasoline or take more gasoline away from the economy.
Okay, you. I think you're getting warmer. What do you mean pouring gasoline?
I started this whole thing off by saying they control the money supply.
Right.
Is that wrong?
No.
Yeah, but what is the purpose of controlling the money supply? That's what we're getting warmer here. We're totally getting
Adam,
warmer.
are you saying
if you're trying to say to prevent economic collapse, I guess if you're trying to say that, but then that's also open to interpretation of is it a collapse or is it a correction?
Go, Sitch, you want to?
Well, no, I was going to say, were you going to say that like the Fed, you're conceptualizing the Fed is basically the police of the money supply?
The Fed,
the SEC is like the police for, Wall Street and investing and stuff of that nature.
The Fed's entire job is to create price stability and
yes,
maximize employment. Price stability is pretty fucking nice, don't you think? I mean,
I thought that was the problem,
in an inflationary environment, everyone right now is bitching about inflation like crazy. If you don't have a Fed, you don't have anyone even working on inflation.
I thought the issue was that, and this was the changeover in the 70s, is that the Fed's mission statement was for full employment or maximum employment.
Maximum employment, yes.
Yeah, and that kind of switched to price stability in the 80s.
Well, it's
away from maximum employment.
It's always been price stability. Price stability was number one. Full employment might have been added on later. It's hard for me.
Right.
Where are you getting that from?
I thought that was in Kelton's book.
No.
She talks about how the Fed because I thought the idea was that now the Fed sort of sacrifices like 8% or whatever the number is of the population to unemployment, in order to keep inflation down, when before it didn't used to do that. Before it was trying to maximize, it's trying to reach full employment essentially in order to kind of combat with, the Soviet Union and stuff like that.
But the whole creation of the Fed was to deal with price stability.
Right.
Yeah. So, but anyway, price stability. I mean, was
price stability the answer you were looking for?
Yes. There are people who believe that price stability will just exist in a world without any sort of monetary system focused on price stability. But I think they're exactly the same as the people who believe that we could just disband the police departments and everyone would be nice to each other. I don't believe in that world.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I mean, obviously, if you're working on a monopoly of money, of the money supply, then yeah, I mean, there needs to be some type of price control in that sense by controlling the money supply, and not artificially.
Well, it's not really. It's not price controls.
Price stability. Sorry.
When people say price controls, you're thinking of something different. You're thinking of the U.S. government coming in and setting the price.
Yeah, I misspoke, but I'm not trying to misframe your argument.
I get when you say price stability, what you really mean is inflation stability, right?
Yeah, well, they're focused on 1% to 2% inflation because deflation causes deflationary spirals and depressions. Yeah,
right.
So I mean, the Austrians will argue that depressions won't do this, but the logic that they put forward just seems insane to me. Why would you, if you have a nice big fat bank account and prices are dropping, you are a fool to go out and buy something today that you could buy for less money tomorrow. That's going to cause a deflationary spiral. This is why we focus on 1% to 2% inflation, because it keeps people spending and it keeps people working. It keeps jobs going. I know this totally triggers the shit out of everybody.
Are you saying the Austrians want deflation?
Yes, they actually advocate for deflation. Yeah.
So,
they look at this constant inflation as a bubble that's never corrected itself, and I'm inclined to agree, because I mean you're working off of what worth. All of the worth that comes from money boils down to, again, right now, I agree this is an accurate reflection, though I think it's unethical. It boils down to, well, the government said so. The government owns the money supply. The government is going to make sure that they keep control of it. And you really, like, at the end of the day, I don't think you own your own dollars.
Well, I mean, I guess you do own your dollars. Just the government basically dictates the worth of the dollar. And I guess I can understand why that triggers people.
Yeah, I do too.
I think that's just the way it is. But so, because I don't, I mean, I haven't read a lot of Austrian economic stuff, so I don't want to strawman anyone. So is it that
You're
they
good.
want deflation, or they just want zero? Like they want to just be static?
Well,
Basically.
the economy is naturally going to go through I guess they call it the business cycle.
Right.
But usually the trend always trends upwards because people tend to create more wealth. That's just naturally what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Mike's got it right.
So, yeah, but wouldn't that naturally lead to some amount of inflation
Deflation.
or deflation?
Well, there's also some, and this is even contested in the Austrian circles, that you can avoid the business cycle by getting the government completely out of the monetary system, which I mean, I don't believe that.
This
Wait,
is like
what
this
is
is
the-
like
what is
saying
the-
you can avoid bank robberies by disbanding the police. That's basically what they're saying.
What is the business
I
cycle
know.
again?
Yeah, the boom bust cycle. So you see it go up, and then it starts to go up faster, and then it goes faster than what people are willing to pay for it, and the prices have been inflated. So to correct, the economy has to
I
crash.
see.
A little.
It's
Basically
usually
the same as like the political pendulum effect. Once something keeps going until it goes too far, and then it collapses, and then it kind of rebounds, and we just go through this pendulum back and forth.
since you've heard of a recession, right?
No, yes, I know.
So a recession is just the low point in the business cycle.
Right. Yeah.
So
The Austrians think
usually
that there will be they think that things would just be stable improvement without the government involvement.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds crazy to me, but okay, sure.
So I'm like, obviously, there's people who are going to work fraudulently in business.
Right.
Like that's a level of regulation I'm totally okay with, And I mean, you would even say the fraudulency is its own distortion of the market, because if people knew in reality what they were paying for, they wouldn't pay for it. And that's kind of the entire idea from the Austrian perspective, as far as I understand it, is this really quick increase in prices is because people start to get, a little greedy, seeing how much they can get out of people, until they hit a point where people are like, well, I can't pay for that. So that price is the distortion in the market, that overly inflated price. So it corrects itself by going down naturally. Now, I mean, I'm not saying this is the best way to have a constantly chugging along economy. I would not make that argument. I think MMT makes a good argument for having an economy that is kind of harnessed in and more stable at continuing the velocity of transactions, which is a big part of kind of Adam's idea that when the more stuff you have, the better off we are. And the increase in velocity of transactions means more stuff is moving around all the time. People get more stuff, So like there's something to that. But what do you sacrifice? And I think you sacrifice the stability of like the worth of money itself, frankly. Why do foreign governments have to purchase our debt?
they don't.
Why does that have? Why do they then?
Because they want to.
They think it's going to increase in value.
Yeah, it's an investment
Right.
for them.
So
Listen, they have a bunch stockpile of resources in dollar bills. Those dollar bills earn zero interest. If I offer you a bond that earns 2% interest and your dollar bills are just going to sit there for a year anyway, why wouldn't you want to buy the bond?
No, I get that. I guess more specifically, why is it important that when we have to go further and further into debt, at least maybe I am misunderstanding this.
Yeah, this is another thing about MMT. It's not, people conceptualize debt wrong. And they get super triggered because debt to them is like, I don't want to be in debt personally. So
I know this part, but you are welcome to explain it to the audience.
Oh, okay. Well, no, you explain it. If you know this part.
So the debt is the money supply, basically.
Right.
The national debt is the money supply, and by shrinking the national debt, you are taking dollar bills out of the market by paying them out to people who have our debt, basically.
Right. Yes.
But
we could pay off the entire
supply,
national debt tomorrow.
But why does the money supply have to look like debt? Why is that even? Who do we owe the money to?
Well, the origin of the money supply, well, the origin of the national debt is, and you tell me if this doesn't seem intelligent to me, because it does, it seems very intelligent to me. So if the government spends $1,000 and they tax back $1,000, that year of spending is what we would call deficit neutral, right? Because
Yeah.
it wasn't added to the deficit. They spent exactly how much they taxed. Over time, we build up a deficit because we spend more money than we tax back. So if the government spends $1,000 and they tax back $900, they've run a $100 deficit, and $100 has stayed out in the economy, right? Well, that
Okay, so
becomes your bank account, becomes the money that floats around and people spend. That's the money supply.
Let's back it up. Who owned the dollars first?
Who? The government did. This is
Okay.
spending
If
comes
the government,
first.
if the government owned the dollars first, why does spending result in debt? Why isn't it just I spent money and now I'm at $0, whereas I owe $1,000 to ?
Well, I would argue that it's bad for us to even be calling it debt. I mean, I wouldn't call it debt.
Then why is it called debt? I guess that's where I'm questioning. Because like if it matters that we have a national debt every time we print money and spend it on things, we owe money to someone else. That says to me the value of the dollar is not the government taxation. It's the fact that someone is paying for us to print money for whatever reason. We're matriculating dollars by pulling it from an outside source. That's what it seems like to me. I don't know.
I don't want to argue definitions with you, Mike.
Okay, not to be a Sitch's law guy, but that's the entire argument we're going to have here. 1,000%.
Well, you tell me your definitions and I'm happy to use them. Then we don't have to argue definitions. I mean, do you understand what I just laid out? The process?
Yeah, but I don't think if the origin of the $1,000 is, well, the government made it, then why is it called debt? That's like the whole debt means you owe money to someone else.
Then we're having an entirely different conversation. It's about definitions, which I find them super.
If the government creates a dollar, okay, and then it just gives it out to people, or I guess it pays it to people or whatever, and then that's called debt. Like, what if they just called it not debt?
I mean, if they just called it not debt and it operated unlike debt, then I'm 1,000% in favor of that.
Does it? It technically doesn't operate like debt anyway. So
then why do we have to pay it back? Who are we paying it back to?
You don't.
Well,
because of inflation.
We're paying interest. We're paying interest on our debt.
Yeah, but okay, so maybe this is what confusion is. It's not like the government could create money and then pay people stuff, and that doesn't create debt. It's that for every dollar created, the government issues a corresponding bond, right?
Well, I never got to the end of the.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking Adam. Is that true? Is that for every dollar the government creates, there's a corresponding bond that's created, and then
yes, and I even have the why. I even have the why, which is the important part. Okay.
Okay. Well, let me just lay it out. So every dollar printed,
yes,
or digital currency created by the government, every one that's created in an account somewhere, there's a corresponding bond that's created that a bank or a government or someone somewhere can buy, right?
No. I mean, listen, let me just finish. Can I just finish the experiment uninterrupted, and then we can...
This is why we need to talk about the debt part.
Go for it, Adam.
Well, what do you... Before I move on, you're obviously losing a lot of sleep over this debt thing, which, I would get a good... I would get a good psychologist and work on that, because it's not good for your health. Like, it's not good for, like, nobody's going to show up at your door and say, listen, we need this money from you because we got this huge debt we have to take care of. we could deal. Listen, if we wanted to take care of that debt, if the Chinese showed up and said, listen, we're so fucking sick of holding your bonds that earn 5% interest. We want cash now that earns 0% interest. We'd go, okay, here, let's crank up the printing press, give them a bunch of cash, shove it in their faces, take their bonds back, and then we would be paying 0 interest. If we decided that, hey, we're tired of paying interest to China, let's just give them a bunch of dollars anyway and take our bonds back and say, fuck you. We
But
could do that.
wouldn't that increase the circulation supply of the dollar by printing and paying it all immediately and then devalue our dollar massively?
It would definitely cause a lot of inflation if the Chinese said, okay, well, since we're not earning 5% on our money, let's just spend this money. Let's all buy Ferraris. Yes, it would cause inflation. So back to the original example where the government spent $1,000 and taxed back $900, left $100 out there in the economy to sop up the purchasing power of that extra $100 in the economy. The government creates a bond and says, hey, I have a $100 bond here. I would like to offer this to somebody to incentivize them not to spend their $100, to sop up that purchasing power and not cause inflation. So the whole purpose of bonds is to stop inflation. Like when they offer government bonds because we're having a war or something, the reason they want to offer bonds is not necessarily to pay for government spending. It's because there are less supplies. A lot of the supplies are going to the war effort. So if everybody hangs on to their money and spends like drunken sailors, that's going to cause inflation. Inflation is caused by people competing for scarce resources, right? If there's not a lot of houses and a lot of people that want houses, the price of houses is going to go up, right? Because people are going to be competing for these resources, these scarce resources, and driving up the price. Well, what you do when you offer somebody a bond is you basically take their spending power off of the table. They're saying, listen, I'm not going to go out there and compete for houses. I'm going to not spend my money, and you're going to give me an extra 5% on my money over time. So that's one of the tools that they use to create price stability. And it seems like a good tool to me.
But then why even print the money in the first place? If you're just gonna put it out there and then suck it back in. What's the point of that?
Wait a minute. Wait. Before we answer that question, so would it make sense to call the debt not the money supply, but the debt is like the counter inflation supply? I mean, is that what you're saying, Adam?
Okay, I mean, I'm not totally following how the bond directly goes to the debt.
The inflation fighting supply. I don't know.
But is that an accurate depiction or description of what the debt is?
I don't. How do you? I mean, it's so tough. What is the debt? Because people listen.
Okay.
When the government overspends and taxes back, they do these bond sales, and people show up in droves to buy the paper.
Let's back up here, so I'm not confused. So the audience isn't confused. Because I'm just a poor Florida boy. Okay, I don't got no fancy economic degrees. Okay, I don't understand this stuff. So basically, what happens is that when the government, we can use like the stimulus checks for example. Okay, the government gives everyone whatever it was, $800, $1,200 or whatever. When the government does that, the government doesn't have to accrue any debt when the government does that. Since the government creates money, and this is what MMT says, we think that the government has to tax money, get it from people, and then redistribute it. That's not actually what happens. The government is just snapping their fingers. They're creating $1,200 in every person's account. Okay.
Yes.
Now that technically could be done in a way that creates zero debt, zero national debt. Okay?
Technically, yeah.
Technically, they can just say, boom, zero national debt. Here's $1,200. However, or $1,200. However, our government doesn't do that. When our government issues money out or gives money to people or pays for stuff, they issue a corresponding instrument called a bond that is worth whatever they print. And that bond is then bought by some entity, by a bank, by a foreign government, by an individual private citizen. And that bond has a 1 or 2%, whatever the interest rate is, attachment mechanism to it. And that is what creates debt. The bond is what creates debt, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so then the next question is, well, wait a minute. If the bond creates debt, why do we have bonds in the first place? And then you said, well, the reason we have bonds is because bonds counter inflation.
Right. They create price stability.
And create price stability. And the reason for the explanation for that is because if the government just snaps their fingers and gives everyone $1,200 with no debt, obviously that will create inflation because you've just drastically increased the money supply.
Correct.
However, if the government at the same time that it creates $1,200 for everyone says we're going to issue the exact same amount in bonds to rich people or to banks or foreign governments, that's reducing the money supply by the same amount, because basically then the people that don't need money will then take the exact equivalent amount and they will buy the bond, thus reducing the money supply by,
so it's
equally.
a method of kind of redistributing money in a sense, but through voluntary action.
Yes.
Okay. That
Well,
makes a little
it's not really redistributing any money because, I mean,
well,
Well,
it's
it
not-
could-
it's
well,
not-
in the
it's
example
not
I used,
forcing.
it
It's not
is.
forcing anyone to do it.
Right.
Like it's doing it by using.
well,
how's it
redistributing
Well,
money?
wait,
the
wait.
people,
In the
the people who
example-
buy the
example I
bond
gave-
have their
oh,
money.
wait.
The people.
In the example I gave, it could be conceptualized that way, but I was just using COVID stimulus
Yeah.
as an example. If the government buys anything or spends any money, it would be doing this process.
It
And
would
so
be
basically it's a way to make the money supply equal net zero, or to make inflation, I guess, equal net zero.
you can shrink the money supply through taxation, which would be conceptualized as redistribution. But selling the bonds is not redistribution because the people who are buying the bonds still own the bonds. They still own the asset.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
They haven't.
Well,
You haven't taken anything from them.
It would be redistributing the money. Well, actually, could you say it's redistributing the money supply, but not money? But that might be
You're
too
you're
convoluted for people.
You're
too.
sopping up the purchasing power.
Right.
You're basically incentivizing people to say, "I'm not going to spend my money today. I'm going to spend my money in a year."
Right.
Which
And you're hoping the bond is on pace with inflation.
Well,
Right.
no. This is
Well,
why.
it is on place with whatever the interest rate is.
Yeah, the Fed sets the interest rate, so whatever the Fed.
Yeah, but if inflation goes out of control, then people wouldn't buy the bond because it would be outpaced by inflation. Right?
what depends.
That'd be a problem.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. No,
Right.
nobody wants to deal. The whole idea behind you want your money to earn money is to deal with inflation. But
Right. And that's why a lot of these other, this haven't happened. Well, maybe it happened in the past, but so like when a lot of countries are having inflation problems, no one wants to buy their bonds because they're viewed as being worthless, essentially.
So the reason why, if nobody does anything, you will get deflation is because Mike is exactly right. The economy creates wealth over time. That wealth expands the supply of goods and resources or goods and services. If the money supply stays the same, then those goods and services become cheaper over time because the pile of stuff is getting bigger, but the pile of money is staying the same.
Right.
So, like I said, and the logic seems sound to me, if I can buy a house today for $1,000 and I can buy it tomorrow for $500, I'm a fool if I'm buying a house today. Correct?
Right.
So you have runaway deflation because
Right.
people will just wait for it to be cheaper tomorrow.
So
and
the
that kills
point- so
quote
the
unquote kills the economy.
Right. So the whole point of the Fed is to create price stability as the goods and services pile increases, they increase the money supply to match that. And of course, they can
they're
create
trying
heirs
to-
or only human beings, right?
They're trying to artificially eliminate the business cycle, basically.
Hold on a
Not
second.
necessarily. They're just trying to keep inflation rate and price stability at a specific level. It's not really has anything to do specifically with the business cycle.
Well, the business cycle is created by individuals creating new products, new goods and services that people get irrationally exuberant about. That's what causes the business cycle. So everybody wants to invest in crypto because it's going to make us all bazillionaires, and let's all get, everyone wants to invest in .coms because .coms, who cares if they don't make any profit? We're all going to get rich.
That's a whole other discussion to be had as far as the nature of money. But yeah.
how do you blame the business cycle on the Federal Reserve, who's just basically trying to make the money supply mirror what's going on?
I wasn't blaming the business cycle on the Fed. I was saying that the idea is they're trying to keep the boom and bust as shallow as possible.
The Austrians literally do blame the boom and bust cycle on the Fed.
Oh yeah, I mean the Austrians do. I'm trying to give you you're like repeat back to you what the conception is that the Fed is trying to do. They're trying to keep the inflation consistent without too many big peaks or too many low valleys.
Right. They're trying. The Fed is basically like a thermostat. Like you put a thermostat on your house, you don't know what's going to go outside, what's going to go on outside with the weather. It could be, 20 below one day and, 120 the next day, right? The outside is beyond your control. But your little air conditioner, your little heater on your house is designed to, keep your house at a certain temperature. That's exactly what's going on with the money supply. They don't know what's going to happen in the economy. These are a bunch of human beings, creating things and destroying things and creative destruction, a complex economy. They're just basically trying to be the referee for this, this amazing thing that goes on called capitalism. So that's why
that's the best faith interpretation of the function of the Fed.
Right.
I would agree with that.
Well, a lot of people don't even know that price stability is what the purpose of the Fed is.
Right. So what I guess.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say. So what is? I mean, I feel like now I sort of understand what the conversation is about. So what is the disagreement about then?
I don't think that the inherent value of money comes from coercion. I think
where does it come from?
The fact that people want to trade it, the fact that people subjectively as a group, subjectively as individuals, collectively as a group agree we want to trade this because we see it has value for whatever reason. I mean, you could say that the fiat from the dollar comes from taxation at the end of the day because someone's going to demand that the consumer needs that money. Right. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, you can trade anything without the threat of violence. Like you can literally trade anything.
But
it's whether or not
you can't backstop it though. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, you risk having you risk it going out of control, for lack of a better term. But then why not? And I know you're probably going to have some stuff for this, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Why not have competing currencies in the same market?
Well, first of all, there are already because there's crypto. There was this thing called mortgage-backed securities, which were
not really
a type
currencies,
of.
though.
I will argue really quickly. I don't think the crypto one is real today. It wants to be, but it's not yet. It's not really a really effective currency at this point, even though I'd like it to be.
No, it's terrible as a currency because they have no Fed focused on price stability.
As a currency, the technology potential is there for some fucking excellent uses and decentralization, but it's not used that way because people are trying to use it the way they used, I think it was tulips back in the early aughts.
I only brought up crypto because you said you made a very specific claim about people can have money without any sort of coercive element. And crypto is something people want crypto. And I mean, we could argue over whether or not this is coercive because people are buying crypto right now because they believe it's going to be worth more in the future. Nobody buys crypto because they think it's going to be worth less in the future.
They're treating it like an investment and less like an actual currency because or rather like a money as really the proper term because the future of crypto is so unpredictable. They would rather hold on to it and see that the value goes up as opposed to trade with it and miss out on that increased wealth.
As soon as everybody believes that crypto is going to be worth less in the future than it is today, what happens to the price of crypto?
I mean, it's going to crash.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That can't happen with the US dollar because there will always be demand because of taxation. Taxation creates the demand. So that backstops the currency in a way that these voluntary currencies do not have. In the Russia Ukraine thing, Putin did something that was very MMT-ish. The ruble is crashing. Nobody wants to own rubles, but he knows everybody needs Russian gas and oil. So he basically created a sort of ruble tax. He said, listen, you can only buy Russian gas and oil in rubles. Right. So he did basically was doing backstopping the ruble. Now, this didn't work, but the idea is sound. If you can't buy gas or oil from the Russian government and you need gas and oil, you're going to have to go to the currency exchanges and buy rubles. If people are forced to buy rubles on the currency exchanges, what happens to the ruble? Supply and demand. The demand is there, so the cost of the ruble goes up, and Putin controls the supply of the ruble. So he can fix the supply to match whatever price he wants. He's basically creating the price stability without the tax model.
Okay. Well, I guess the question, which is what Knight is getting at, is could you have a currency that isn't backed by coercion, right? That's the question you're posing.
I don't know that you can.
I think you can, but it's not going to be as stable. I mean, I will fully agree with that. But that's also why I think quote unquote, ideally, thinking from a perspective of trying to decentralize as much as possible and have as few central points of failure in any social system. I think having multiple competing currencies is a way to have the least damage and suffering done to individuals while also keeping things decentralized, if that makes any sense. So, I mean, you're going to sacrifice that stability, but you're also going to get back your frankly, your financial freedom, I would say.
Do you really have financial freedom, though, if the economy crashes? If employment goes up to 25%?
I mean, I'm not advocating that this just like snap the fingers and like the economy's changed tomorrow. This is something I would advocate as a very slow, gradual change as technology develops.
If you
that's my position anyway.
If you have hyperinflation or you have deflation and depressions, I don't know how you can call that freedom. Like the whole idea behind price stability is like you want an environment.
It's security.
Yeah, listen, you have temperature stability inside your home. That is very nice. The whole purpose of our system is to create that kind of price stability. And without price stability, I mean, you don't get like a robust innovation cycle like we have. Like it's hard to run a business with a high inflation.
That's probably the hardest argument, I would say, against my position, is the fact that obviously this MMT model has fueled insane levels of innovation just because it keeps business more predictable, which is good for business in general. Predictability is always the best. And that's going to increase transactions, which means people have more money to research and develop more shit. You know, and it's also, I mean, as much as I'm not a Stephanie Kelton fan, the fact that she wants to focus the government spending into R&D, I think is smart.
Well,
let's see if it gets there.
This also, I mean, it implements, and this is one of the things why I don't know why the right is so down on MMT when most of them are very pro business because
they don't trust the elites in charge of spending. I mean, it does the answer for you there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't trust the centralization of these processes.
Okay.
I think that's true, but I also think it's on the whole. I think when you start telling people like, you know, MMT kind of lays out what the dollar is in a way that people don't think of it that way or realize it that way, and I think that bothers. Like to think about it. Yes, and I think that bothers a lot of right-wing moral intuitions to think that like the dollar literally only has value because it's being taxed by the government, because that kind of destroys the whole taxation equals theft argument.
I don't see how you can be pro business and then want the government to be fucking stupid. The government needs to support business. Like the government making stupid business decisions is not good for anybody.
Well, of course, but I don't know what that has to do with what we were talking
Well,
about.
the MMT says that, listen, if you're in a business, okay, and Warren Buffett is a perfect example of this. When the fucking market tanks and everything's on sale, Warren Buffett is buying like a madman, right? He buys when everyone else is selling because that's smart business. Why the fuck would you run your government completely opposite of that? When you have a downturn and you can get unemployment at dirt cheap, why aren't you building bridges? Why aren't you building roads? Why aren't you doing all that stuff? Why are you doing all of that stuff at the top of the business cycle when labor is 3 times as much?
Because the perception
Is wrong.
of all this is inverted. Yes, is that the government is like, if the economy is in a downturn and the government starts spending money, the view, which the MMT says is the incorrect view, is that the government is sucking money out of the people's hands and then spending it on all these programs.
It's not. It's putting money in the
doing,
people's
right?
hands,
which is the inverse of what's actually happening.
Right. So the model of the world that the business, so-called business people have is retarded. Completely retarded.
It depends on which business people we're talking about.
Do you want Mike, do you want your government, paying $1,000 for a hammer? Like, I don't want that.
I think that's not the best faith argument.
No, it is not. Well, let me ask you, Mike, do you think that MMT is true, but that there's an alternative way to have our currency set up? Or do you think that MMT is just not true at all?
No, I mean, I thought I was clear about this, but I'll say it very clearly.
Okay.
I think MMT is an accurate way of interpreting the way the American economy and probably other European economies work today. And I think that they hide the ball when they say it's only descriptive. I think it is also prescriptive that they say this is how it ought to operate, that there should be elites at the top pulling the strings. Because, I mean, every time that happens, every fucking time, the distortions in the market don't come from the fact the Fed isn't trying to do their job. It comes from the fact that they always grease the skids, man, every single fucking time.
Well, is that the Fed or is that, Congress?
I mean, fucking potato, tomato. Fucking.
Well, but no, because like if the Fed is just trying to manage interest rates or price stability or something, like they have like a very narrow thing of what they're trying to do, and then Congress is passing a whole bunch of laws and they're passing spending bills. And that has all sorts of...
This bill's got to be funded.
Right, but I'm saying like it just seems like Congress, like I can understand people having more problems with the way Congress is spending money rather than the Fed just simply controlling interest rates, which, I mean, obviously controlling interest rates has an effect, a downturn effect and all this stuff, but
yeah. Well, the Fed has complained about this time and time again because the Fed is saying, listen, you can't do all of these stimulus checks and we don't have a magic button to shrink the fucking, like, interest rates only affect so much.
Can I also be clear about my personal position on this?
Yes.
I am not an end the Fed advocate, at least not at this moment. I am an audit the Fed. Okay. We should absolutely see where this money is actually going and how much is actually being printed.
Right. So yeah, I don't
wait, what is that? I hear that a lot, but I'm not sure I understand what that means. What does it mean to audit the Fed?
To actually see where the money is being sent to and how much.
Well, I mean, don't we know that, don't we? What do you mean?
Well, it's a private.
Where do you find?
It's a private bank, so.
It's a private, public, bizarro.
Listen,
conglomeration.
If the Fed sells treasury bills to private parties, those private parties might want everyone to know they own a bunch of treasury bills. So I mean, there's a privacy issue there.
Oh, so when you say is it just figuring out who's buying the bonds, who's buying the T-bills? Is that the? I mean, we know how much money exists, right? We know what the debt is. I mean, that's not.
Yes.
Fucking
Well, the Fed, Sitch, remember the toxic
Mhm.
asset program during the housing crash?
Yes.
So the banks all created their own currency called mortgage-backed securities. Remember?
yeah.
I don't like thinking of them as currencies.
Well, they were investment vehicles, right? They were something
Right, but
that sat
currency isn't generally thought of as an investment vehicle. It's thought of as a store of value
commercial
that is
paper,
stable.
right? It's basically debt, an IOU from somebody to pay a certain amount of money, right? A mortgage-backed security is going to pay off the mortgage, off people paying
Right.
their mortgages. That's the instrument to
Yes.
turn. I give you $1,000, you're going to give me a certain interest rate on that $1,000 because people are going to pay their mortgages and give you
Right.
money, and you're going to split it up and give it all back to us, right?
Right.
So, but when people stopped paying their mortgages, that money supply ran out, right? But they made all sorts of business dealings on the fact that that money was going to come in. So
Right.
that those things that were sitting in their bank vault that were obviously worthless all of a sudden,
Mhm.
the reason why the collapse of the economy was imminent was because they needed those revenue sources to pay people's wages and whatever else. Who knows
Right.
what's
They
down?
had debted themselves in the red
Right.
on the basis of mortgage-backed
Who knows
securities
what's
paying out.
downstream
Yes.
from those revenue sources, right?
Yes.
So the
right.
Federal Reserve came in with their toxic asset program, I'm sure you've heard of,
Mhm.
and they said, listen, we'll buy those piece of shit fucking mortgage-backed securities for you so we can be your revenue source and you can continue to pay those people down the line and the whole fucking economy doesn't collapse, right?
Mhm.
So that's basically why people want to audit the Fed, because they're like, the Fed is, they opened up, when they talk about opening up their balance sheet, this is exactly what they talk about. Balance sheet is, we're going to buy things and give you money and we own the thing, right?
I see.
So those assets were bought, and obviously they did like a bunch of short sales and stuff like that. Unwinding, you've probably heard of, is them trying to put these instruments to bed and settle the
Well,
score.
what's the benefit of having the Fed be this private public quasi entity as opposed to just simply being a government entity entirely?
Because then it's supposed to be insulated from politics to some extent.
Oh, okay.
So the Republicans don't come in and say, write off, basically, all the stuff you've paid, write it all off. Well, that it's politics interferes with that ultimate goal of price stability, right? When
Mhm.
the Fed steps in and buys those toxic assets, they're only doing it because of price stability. They're worried about a deflationary spiral that's going to put everyone out of work and cause another Great Depression, right? This
Right.
is the thing. They have a tangible goal. Like your heating and air conditioning unit on your home has a tangible goal, right? It's to keep the house at 68 degrees. I don't know what you set your thermostat at, but so that's why when people talk about this, oh, if we just got rid of the Fed, it seems like I hear I'm just going to get rid of my heating and air conditioning unit and the house will be perfectly comfortable. I don't think that's the way it works.
Mhm.
I don't think that's how, I mean, this is a very chaotic system that we've built up here. I don't know. And they did this too during, you don't remember because you were just a kid, but when the Lehman Bank failed, that's when things really started going crazy, because a lot of, these banks, their revenue sources support a lot of businesses. Like a lot of these businesses,
Yeah.
they're basically paying their workers and buying supplies on bank loans and shit. So
Right.
if their bank goes under, then all of a sudden the auto industry goes
Okay.
under. Yeah.
Well, I want to let Mike talk because I feel like you've talked 80% of this
No,
conversation.
no,
Okay.
it's good. It's good.
But
No,
so,
like,
but
keep,
are you?
go ahead.
Did you want to come on to pitch an alternative system? I got like what exactly did you want to argue with Adam about? I guess.
Well, I mean, kind of an I mean, I'll be 100% honest. I'm not 100% decided on where I lie on everything because I'm still
That's
learning all
good.
the time. And I try not to be too decisive on
Mhm.
this stuff. It was really more to have that alternative was to have something to say when Adam's like, well, what the fuck would you do?
Right.
Fuck's your alternative?
So what the fuck do we do? What do we do? What's the alternative?
Are you?
My best case scenario that I can think of at the moment would
Mhm.
honestly be trying to adopt especially since we live in the internet age now, trying to adopt things like cryptocurrencies as an alternative to a medium of exchange and have them in circulation along with the dollar. You know, like
Mhm.
when I say circulation, I mean actually using them in transactions. At least get that started so that we can test the waters a little bit, see how stable they actually are. And I mean, obviously, understanding there's a shitload of them that are terrible, and there's going to be a whole lot of fluctuations because the currencies themselves aren't just mediums of exchange; they're also entire networks that can actually take on a much larger workload than just being money, which also gives them some more inherent value than the dollar, you could say.
Isn't that what we're doing right now though with cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, but we're not trading. We're not trading them for items or for services that
Hmm.
often. You know, most of what we're doing with trade is buying and selling them for dollars. Trying, and a lot of people are trying to do that in the hopes that they get more dollars, which kind of
Right.
says like, well, at the end of the day, the dollar is worth more than that.
But
Uh,
isn't I like I mean, I'm assuming there's no law that says a store can't accept cryptocurrency, right? It's like this is just individuals' decisions not to accept crypto in that way.
yeah, yeah. The idea being like I was articulating before was that people are looking at it as an investment, hoping they can get more of those dollars back because
Right.
they're seeing the value go up and up and up, and that's why that's one of the mechanisms preventing people from using it. That and just
Right.
people not really understanding what the hell it is, and frankly, each individual cryptocurrency system is quite complicated. Usually it takes a lot of study to actually understand what the fuck they
Right.
actually do. You know.
Well, that is true. But I guess what I was asking is, unless you had a government come in and make, by fiat, add extra currencies, which would be sort of counter to the spirit, I guess, of what you're laying out, it would have to sort of come out and have these extra currencies or these alternative currencies would have to come about naturally, sort of the same
Yeah.
way that crypto came about. And I guess I would say, well, so far, it doesn't seem like anyone wants to treat them like currencies. So what
Yeah.
would it take for people to start treating them like currencies?
uh Time and taking a risk, frankly, the
Hmm.
risk of trading with it, which I mean is easier said than done.
Right.
You could say it's counter incentive, but I mean people have done things that are counter to immediate incentives before, and the hope and idea that long term this will start actually
Right.
fucking changing things
I don't know.
for the
It
better.
just seems it seems to me that I don't see how crypto will ever become that. Will become that vehicle. Like at the end of the day, people in my mind are always going to want to trade crypto for currency of one country or another because at the end of the day, currency does need to be backed. It does need to be pegged to something specific, I think. I think currency always needs to be pegged to something specific. And usually that's paying taxes to whatever government of whatever country you live in.
Yeah, the value of the cryptocurrency is pegged to, I guess it depends upon how you define peg. It's pegged to the work that people do to mine it in order to validate the transactions themselves.
Yeah, but that's not worth anything.
I mean, it's worth the work, the time and effort, the electricity spent in
Actually,
order to.
the price of
No,
crypto is pegged to supply and demand. I mean,
no, but if something's a currency, okay, you have to say, well, why does someone want to use like I could hand out Sitch and Adam, business cards and say
Yeah.
this is a currency and no one's gonna give a fuck because who cares? It has to have some inherent value, it has to have some inherent reason for why people want to use the currency. And so with countries' currency, it's because you can pay taxes to that country. And I guess what I'm saying is
Yes.
crypto is there's nothing there.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue, but besides violence, there's nothing there at the dollar either. But I mean, I guess
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Well,
trying
it's
to
well,
sweep
it's
away the argument.
yeah, well,
What's
regardless
the
of whether you want to
incentive?
categorize taxes as violence, which I mean, I guess you could do that, but
taxation is
that
theft.
is that is a thing. That is a thing. You're that is the reason for why people would use the U.S. dollar, and I don't see what would be the reason for using crypto.
I guess if you're thinking about the root of the value of the
Yes.
dollar, I can see that, and you could also argue the root of the value of crypto is the dollar at this point too. If you
Mhm.
really want to make that
Well, it
argument.
is currently seeming like, but
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, just the fact that people are exchanging it, like I think that's really where the value comes in. The value of the medium of exchange is the fact that people are using it to exchange. I guess
right. I understand that.
you're asking what's that primary, that starter that's
Well,
going to
because
kick it off, where people actually see the inherent value in it, or like as Adam would call it, the backstop.
right.
Yeah,
Well, because
good.
I'm trying.
Very
I
good.
think I thought what you were saying is that you wanted crypto or something like crypto to be an alternative to the U.S. dollar, which would mean it would have to have its own thing in it. It couldn't just be reliant on the U.S. dollar if it's going to be an alternative,
I mean,
right?
I'll be 100% honest. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm agreeing with you, yes,
Okay.
but also
Okay.
I don't know. But the way that I would ever picture it is, because at least Bitcoin is supposed to be scarce. It's supposed to have a finite number, but they think they just increased the number of Bitcoin you
Did
can
they
mine
really?
now.
Holy shit.
I could be
They
I could be
moved up
wrong.
to 21 million. The thing is, the part of the equation most cryptocurrency people don't get is desirability. It's not just scarcity. It's scarcity plus desirability. And as soon as desirability
Right.
evaporates, scarcity no longer matters.
I think if you get the cryptocurrency into circulation as actual trade, and then say the dollar became obsolescent or whatever, let's pretend, I think
Mhm.
it would take care of it. I think it would take care of itself.
Sure,
Just
but I
because it
guess
would.
I mean I agree with you, but the question is, what is the mechanism that gets that changeover to occur? And that's what I don't understand. That's what I don't see happening, I guess.
Businesses
That's
accepting it
fair.
would up the desirability considerably
No, of course, but
Yeah.
why would businesses accept it
because they can
over
pay
the
their
dollar?
taxes with it. Oh wait, no, they
Yeah,
can't.
that's what I'm
do
saying. Why would a business, why would an American business accept crypto over the, they might accept both, but why would they accept crypto over the dollar?
They wouldn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fair question.
Well, and also,
I mean, right now they would accept it over the dollar because they would think of it as an investment in the future. But that's what we're
Right.
trying to get away from. That's what we're trying to get away
Right.
from.
stocks plunge in value during recessions because people, times get tight and people need money. So they sell their assets, and everyone's selling assets at the same time, lowers the price level. As
Right.
soon as you're in that environment, like crypto is going to be under massive pressure. There are all these people who are sitting on crypto thinking, I have thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. As soon as all those people show up to sell on the same day, that price is going to tank.
It's going to be terrible. Yeah, it's going to be
Mhm.
absolutely awful.
Well, and
Um,
the Warren Buffetts of the world are not going to be there to be picking over this. Like, the reason why the stock market has a floor is because people with money come in and go, "This is insane," and they buy. But I don't know that that's
yeah.
there for crypto.
Well, and
Oh, go ahead.
I would say crypto seems kind of like it's like the modern version of gold. It's sort of the counter. It's like the hedge against a lot of other investments.
I would say Bitcoin acts more that way.
Okay, so Bitcoin specifically.
Yeah.
So, but if that's the way it acts, if Bitcoin acts as a hedge, then it could never replace currency because it has to act as the hedge against, the dollar and these kinds of investments.
So the gold was the currency originally.
Right, and then it got replaced by the dollar.
By the paper money,
Yeah,
because
by paper money.
because of Grisham's law.
Right, and then gold becomes sort of the hedge against that.
And that's, I guess, where I was trying to get towards, but with putting aside the fundamental problem for a second,
Mhm.
that Bitcoin would act as that hedge, but not against like the dollar, against other cryptocurrencies. That's kind of the way I would
see.
conceive something like that. But I mean, I'll still grant you there's the fundamental problem of actual adoption.
There's
Right.
one.
Well, that's what I don't see why anyone, because as you said, businesses might accept crypto because they think it's going to increase in value, or as opposed to the dollar,
Mhm.
doesn't. But so then it's like, but that's really them accepting an investment more than currency, or it's them investing a speculative vehicle more than a currency, you know, I don't see how it's ever going to replace the dollar or any currency like that.
Well, it's a problem for me to work on, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, if I'll fully admit I don't have a full answer to that.
Mhm.
There's another thing that you mentioned about like elites doing things, and I know this triggers a lot of people. Like, I don't. When the Federal Reserve is set up to serve a purpose that I think is a public good, price stability. Like, I don't think we can have a vibrant economy without price stability. And a lot of people, like, I don't know, how do you get around people perceiving the Fed doing anything as like elites monkeying around with things when they're trying to create this thing that we all need, price stability?
Because you can have them do things not in favor of price stability in order to favor their cronies in the banks. I mean, that's part of what went down with the housing crisis.
How does inflation or deflation though? Like this is the thing.
It was setting the interest rates.
But they're setting the interest rates to affect inflation or deflation. Like the reason they're raising interest rates now is to fight inflation. They're not raising interest rates so they can help their banker friends.
No, I understand that.
Well, fighting inflation does help their banker friends, but presumably it helps everything, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know why you would conceptualize it that way.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah.
Sorry, fucking Tim JP Mexican said Tim Pool's chat just died because of what Adam said, and I kind of cracked up a bit.
What did I say? I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think it was something to do with saying the Fed acts in favor of like the people.
Oh yeah, but this is so. One of the reasons why I find this so interesting is because you have one side of the equation marching around going, defund the police, which is the most idiotic thing I've ever heard, and you have every person on the right laughing and pointing, going, "That you're a fucking moron." Yeah. That, but at the same time, they're marching around going, "In the Fed," which I'm going,
yeah.
Well, how is that any different?
Well, it's more complicated. That's how it's different.
Listen, I mean, there's a great book that you can read that's fuck, now I can't even remember the name. What's the book with that was on Jackson and the Great Bank War is what it is. So I got in an argument with one of these Austrian economists on Twitter about how the national debt is the money supply. And he said, well, what happened to the money supply when Andrew Jackson cleared the debt, when Andrew Jackson actually paid off the debt and disbanded? It wasn't the Federal Reserve, but it was the precursor to the Federal Reserve. So I went and read a book on this subject. And what happened was all of the state governments had their own central banks and came up with their own competing currency, and it destroyed the economy. So you need some sort of central money supply in order for the economy to work. You can't have Texas money and California money. It just makes absolutely no sense. And then you have all these local municipalities taking advantage.
What was the name of that book?
The Great Bank War, I think it is.
Great Bank War. All right, I'm gonna make it a point to read up on that.
Yeah,
so I remember you were talking about this on another either a stream or a video, and I misplaced it in my mind. I actually wanted to look into that before this conversation because I mean, obviously, it goes back to the whole competing crypto thing, right?
But the fact that this guy is like a university professor. He's a professor of economics, and he throws that at me, and he doesn't know the answer is very telling. I mean,
so the book, it's on my Audible list because I listened to it. It's called The Bank War, Andrew Jackson, Nicholas Biddle, and the Fight for American Finance.
Yes.
By Paul Kahan.
Andrew, that's not how you spell Andrew.
I mean,
The Bank War, Andrew Jackson will probably get it to you.
Asking, I mean, I understand there are a lot of people that hate the federal government and they hate the Fed, but asking for their opinion on how we should run the economy or American finance is the equivalent of asking a bunch of communists who hate the fucking cops and tattoo ACAB on their arm how we should run law enforcement. It's just they're not even part of the conversation here.
Okay, it's not that they're not part of the conversation, but I understand what you're saying, where it's kind of fanciful ideology that where's the practicality in it, and what are the unintended consequences of making such a radical change. I'm with you there. I understand. I mean, I I mean, obviously it's my elephant talking, of course. I still have a fundamental problem with such a centralized institution, and I feel like it is wrought for abuse.
Well, we've done our best to decentralize it by making the Federal Reserve independent, by setting up different Federal Reserve boards all over the United States, by somehow, trying our best to insulate it from our political system. Our political system is set up where we have, multiple bodies of governance before any spending bills can be passed. I mean, one of the reasons why America is great is because we've done our best to decentralize power as much as possible. So, I mean, I do feel like I completely agree with you. I'm not for centralized power at all, but at the same
I
time,
heard you say that on Sunday, and it surprised me with your MMT argument. But
well, I mean, I don't understand because it's not. I mean, it's not really. I don't understanding how things work. I mean, the argument seems to be that we can't figure out how this stuff works because that knowledge is too much power. And I don't get that. How do you make good decisions if you don't understand how these things work?
I guess fundamentally, what going back to what Sitch was saying, with the money has to be backed by something inherently. You need to find a way of somehow decentralized. Like, this would be like the argument from the Austrian perspective, right? You need to find a way of having inherent value by decentralizing. I think that's why they want to peg it back to the gold standard, which makes sense. But at the same time, I have heard some arguments as to why that would potentially lead to some serious deflation.
Somebody
So
somebody is going to control the money supply. It's either going to be controlled by the the government, or it's going to be controlled by private industry. We've seen a bunch of these uh, crypto people, rug pull scams, stuff like that. That's what happens when they control the money supply, right? They cheat.
yeah, that's those are the way I'm describing this as fringe cases. Those are not massively invested into cryptocurrencies. Like most of the, and I could be wrong on this, but most of the larger cryptocurrency orgs, for lack of a better term, um, they're not cheating their freaking people, at least that we can see anyway. And they are competing with other cryptocurrencies in order to get larger investment.
Right. Yeah,
So
I
I
don't
guess, I
know.
guess like from the Austrian side of things, you could say it's in their interest to be as ethical as possible to make sure people are getting the actual value they're investing in.
But
Um,
if you set up a cryptocurrency, let's say we just do a law that says the money supply is going to be X, and that's that, right? That's basically the model for Bitcoin. You're going to get into a deflationary spiral eventually, right? I mean, if you can't expand the
so
money
not not
supply to keep up with.
not necessarily. So that's not Bitcoin's problem. And actually, this is something I wanted to ask you, kind of adjacent to what we're talking
how,
about,
how do you
um,
avoid it?
because Bitcoin is infinitely divisible. So unlike where a dollar is a dollar, and you can break that down. Okay, you can break that down into pennies, but the penny is the smallest you could ever break it down. You can break a Bitcoin down into multiple decimal places. So it's less important that you need to make more because you just split it in half again and again and again. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, the prices are still going to be deflating, right? I mean,
the price.
the divisibility of the currency is not the problem.
Well, the prices are deflating, but you can keep breaking the currency apart and sharing smaller and smaller portions of it as you need to.
Right, but you
So,
run into
like,
the psychology problem where it's if I can buy a house today
oh, you're okay.
for
So you're saying
five,
people would stop
right?
buying. I
Yeah,
got you.
you're gonna
I
run
got you.
into like as soon as you're like, why am I going to buy something today that I could buy for half price tomorrow? I'm not going to.
Because at some point someone's gonna start buying shit again. Like at some point, someone's gonna need to eat, so they're gonna buy that bread.
Right. Well, I guess the issue, like people would buy what they need, but there would be no reason to ever invest in new
Yeah,
things.
buy
right?
excess.
Yeah, and I guess that's also
The
part of
whole
why
economy runs
I
on
am making the
excess.
yeah, and I guess that's part of why I'm also making the argument that I am is because I think that we rely way too much on excess,
Mhm.
and the consumerist economy I think is really bad for our culture inherently.
Okay,
I mean,
Frank-
maybe, but
frankly.
it's kind of what we do, I guess.
Yeah, but it's like, should we be doing it? I mean, I'm full.
I don't
I'm a
know if
full
there's an
I'm a full
alternative.
participant in it, so
Yeah,
keep that in
right.
mind. I'm well aware of the hypocrisy here,
Sure. There might not be an alternative though.
and it's well. I mean, the alternative is we actually have to like think about making sacrifices. You know, that's how dare someone say that?
That sounds like an ESG score to me. I
that
don't
sounds
know.
like us. Yeah, it does.
That's not what I meant.
Meat is an
You got
occasional
Klaus Schwab
treat.
over here, like we need to make sacrifices for sustainability purposes.
Klaus Schwab wearing the Austrian mask.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like I like excess. I feel like we should indulge more excess, to be honest with you. Well, no, I mean, the reason why we have the robust
what's his
innovation.
name from Wall Street? Greed is good.
It is. We ultimately have the vibrant innovation cycle that we have because of
Right.
fashion, which was a complete and utter excess thing. People didn't normally care about clothes. You know, people
Mhm.
had a pair of pants for the week.
No, I understand. Yeah. And I appreciate the whole thing with fashion. I mean, honestly, I think the fashion idea is really where the root of the value of money comes from. It's a sign of status. And I understand we had the whole fucking the adoption conversation with crypto, but I think fundamentally before money is debt, like based on debt, I think it's based on status before anything else. I think that's the whole idea behind the shells. I'm fucking mind reading here, so keep that in mind. But the only thing I could really come to a conclusion on, if you're not going to be able to use the shells for something, except maybe like make weapons, but that seems like that could probably be fragile. Fundamentally, people are getting these shells because aesthetically they look fucking great. Why are people using gold? Gold aesthetically looks fucking great, and it's a way of elevating yourself socially with a visual medium. I am in another status of human being. I'm aesthetically becoming more godlike, for lack of a better term. And you trade those things around to show how much status you have, what level of human being are you?
Right.
You know, and I think that's, in my opinion, where the value of money derives from.
I mean, I didn't realize it till you just said it now, but if we have alternative currencies that aren't backed by a government, so they are like shells, or they are, aren't we basically just recreating the gold standard again?
Without literal gold.
Yeah, with just something other than gold. Isn't that what would happen?
Potentially.
Oh, okay.
You have to get them to fucking adopt first. But
right, obviously. Well,
problem-
we have to talk to Mark Blythe about this, Adam.
I don't mean to be that guy. Can I take a quick break off screen?
Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
I'm not sure how to decentralize myself from the stream here.
I can turn.
You can. I
off
think
on my
on
end.
Zoom you can just mute yourself and turn off your camera. I think.
Gotcha. Word. Be our business.
Do you
Okay.
know the problem with the gold standard, Sitch? Why it's bad to constrain yourself by backing your currency by gold?
Well, I was about to say we have to ask Mark Blythe this because when he talks about it, he basically says the problem with the gold standard is that you have one country produces a bunch of goods another country has gold, and then they give all their gold away to the other country to buy those goods. And then the idea is that there's going to be this like back and forth where the gold keeps flowing in one direction or the other. And then the problem is what happens when one country says we're going to just hoard all the gold.
That's what is happening.
Right. And so it's funny because I was thinking, well, wait a minute. Doesn't that mean that if we go back to the gold standard, we're inherently more globalist in our politics?
Well, if we go back to the gold standard, and China buys all the gold, our money supply can only be a certain size because we don't have access to the gold to expand
Right.
it, which is the problem. Because as
Right.
soon as the next downturn hits and you want to buy up all that cheap labor so you can build bridges and roads, well, first we have to get some gold before we can do it. It's like, that's dumb.
Right. But so it's what I'm getting at, which is funny, is because like usually the people that want to go back to the gold standard have kind of a more libertarian mindset.
Oh, you're right. Totally.
And they're kind of, they want to be more isolationist and they want to be anti-globalist. And it's like contradictory because like, well, actually, if we go back to the gold standard, you have to be way more concerned with what other countries are doing because now other countries directly control your money supply.
Yes.
In a way you don't if your government controls your money supply.
Yes, true. Yeah, exactly
So-
right. They could surreptitiously destroy our economy just by buying gold.
What was
Right.
the,
Because there's
what
this
was
sort
the whole
of,
thing you were talking about with the value of gold and why the gold standard is bad?
that basically other countries can control your money supply because they can buy all the gold in the world or they can buy all your gold. And suddenly your economy is constrained by what another country is doing with your money supply.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's kind of funny because like people are worried like, oh, China's buying up all of US bonds or US debt, and that somehow this is going to mean something bad for us. But it doesn't mean anything bad for us because first of all, the Chinese can't buy like a 20-year bond and then say, fuck you, we're going to call it a now. That's not how any of this stuff
The
financial instruments
contracts. Yeah.
Right. That's not how any of that works. But under the gold standard, they could actually do something more aligned with that. They could say we're gonna sneakily suck all the gold away from America to fuck them over, and then surprise, surprise, you don't have any gold left.
Do you know
America can just not sell that gold, right?
Yeah, but but that would be like, so you have to have the federal government would say to private businesses, you can no longer buy stuff from China. So it'd be more restrictive markets, not.
Well, they could also say you can't sell
okay.
gold to China, and
Yeah, but I'm saying we went back to a gold standard,
right.
So the money is pegged to gold directly. Then you have to say you can't do any business with China because they're just going to take our gold.
There was Fort Knox used to house most of the gold from the gold standard.
Yeah,
And
that's kind of what I was getting at.
And they would move it around. I guess different nations had different rooms with their gold stash for their currency or whatever. And they would wheel the gold around from like the France room to the Spain room to the American room.
Well, I know Mark Blythe says that was the problem was France. France, and he said he claimed that France is actually what caused the post World War I inflation with Germany, that they recalled a bunch of gold from Germany and from a bunch of other companies and fucked everyone over.
Yeah.
So
this is why we abandoned the gold standard.
Right. It seems like the gold standard just would create a lot more problems than it would solve. But I don't know. Is there anything else you want to say, or should I go look at super chats directed at this conversation?
No, I'm good. I think I've made enough of an idiot of myself on stream already.
I don't think you've made any of it. So.
Oh,
I think Adam is made an idiot. I'm just kidding.
I feel like I have. You can't win talking about this stuff because you don't change people's minds. I don't listen. You believe whatever you want to believe about how the economy works. If you want to believe that we should go back to the gold standard and the Fed is just a bunch of shadowy elites fucking with your bank account, knock yourself out, okay? I sleep good at night because I'm a stoic, okay? I don't get all uptight about shadowy figures.
I don't know. I find a lot of utility and a lot of interest in discussing the actual minute definitions of everything. So
That's
like,
true. That is
like
true.
that's because that's kind of the rudiment of where all of the disagreements arise from. If we can't agree upon the fundamental definitions, how are we even going to argue on the higher concepts?
Well, money's just such a contested concept. So
yes, I'll fully agree with
that. Brain for $5. He doesn't like the way you look. I'm so sorry, Mike. Brain is very judgmental. He says, I bet this dude listens to Depeche Mode.
Absolutely fucking not.
Okay.
That is the worst thing that's ever been said.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Hard against Depeche Mode. He says, I asked him what his top 3 musician bands and songs are. $5. It's all artsy fartsy.
So tell us.
What are your top 3 musician bands?
The Cure, Depeche Mode.
Number 1 is Steve Vai. Number 2 is Dream Theater. Number 3 is Opeth.
I have not heard any of them.
You never heard Dream Theater?
No. Are they good?
No, that was really big in my guitar class. All the guitar nerds like Dream Theater.
Yes, dude. Sitch is a Dream Theater boy.
Yeah, Dream Theater, man.
Dream Theater. I got to look these guys up.
Let's see. JMac for $300. Thank you so much,
Daddy J.
Daddy J. That's right. Our central bank, JMac.
Our central banker.
Our Fed, JMac, who sets the rates, says MMT, Austrian model, apples, hell, being an old country boy, I don't know much about any of that. But what I do know is that S-Class is
what?
And A-Team.
I was going to say, I thought J-Mac was A-Team. What?
Happy Tuesday, everyone. Twitter is cancer. Go to the gym. I love you. That is true. That is true.
Twitter is especially cancer today.
Yes.
Because
what's happening on Twitter?
Because everyone's getting called a baby killer.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm going to say the fuck off.
It's baby killers versus rape apologists all over Twitter.
There you go. The other, I'm remembering all these flashbacks from my guitar class. The other person that everyone would wank over in guitar class was Yngwie Malmsteen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he's like really cool when you're like 15 and you're just discovering scales.
Dude, that guy can shred scales like it's nobody's business. Okay.
Yeah, but it's like it's all the same fucking.
Yeah, it's
fucking
fair.
muscle memory.
That's fair.
Fucking,
That's
like,
fair.
And look, I don't hate him, but I'm also like 5 minutes and I'm like good for the month.
I understand. Yeah, you're like a little bit of it goes a long way. That's fair.
Yeah.
Tails said, on what happened if the country started hoarding gold as the gold supply of gold decreases and the market and demand stay the same, it would cause the price of gold to rise. Yeah, that's true. But supposedly, I'm just saying what Blythe was saying. He was saying that there are historical reasons for countries to hoard gold to fuck over other countries and to do all sorts of things. And that's part of what causes problems with the gold standard. But I don't know. We should have, it would be great for us to talk to Mark Blythe at some point about a bunch of issues.
Do you want me to reach out to Mark Blythe? Because I'm happy to do it.
Sure.
I mean, there's lots
of good questions to ask him.
We could probably talk to Haidt. We could probably talk to Brett Weinstein.
Right. We should try to talk to Haidt, definitely too.
I don't know.
I don't know what we talked to Brett about. I would love to talk to Brett.
It might destroy our comedy show cred, though. What do you? I don't get it.
Whatever. It's fine.
We don't need painfully unfunny.
We can't talk to serious people. I don't like.
We can talk to serious people. We can ask them the porn question.
That says a whole lot about me being on the show.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What are you trying to say?
Well, you're a YouTuber like us. Come on. We're all in the same. We're all in the same category here.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask Jonathan Haidt the porn question. Okay.
You want to ask him the POV question?
The POV question. Listen, if he's going to ask people about incest sex, I can ask him the POV question. All right. Fair is fair.
You make a compelling argument. I have no counter. I have no rebuttal.
You have 536 vids for $5 says, God damn it, Adam. The work that the worker did is what imbued their wages with value. That they did that labor for the government is immaterial.
Yes, I completely agree, but you're missing the argument. The main argument is that if you work an entire day and you make $10, you're going to look at products as how much work you had to do to earn the money to make that product. So is where the origin of the price level.
Well, but also you're not saying that the worker's doing labor for the government. Well, no, the work that the worker did is what imbued their wages with value. That's true, I guess, to some extent. But what you're talking about is what values the currency itself, not the work itself, and that's a
Right.
different subject matter.
Well, and what I'm talking about, you're valuing products and services based on what they're worth to the currency,
Okay.
right? Like if seriously, if you're a wealthy individual, you know, you'll pay more for things, right? You do a
Mhm.
different cost benefit analysis when you're buying something, correct?
Okay.
But the whole idea is that there is, the price of something is created by the demand, by 100 people wanting that thing. And there's a certain
Right.
point when you raise the price up too high, that demand evaporates, right? Because everyone goes, "Oh,
Right.
I'm not paying for that. I
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
work too
Exactly.
hard
Right.
for that." Apples at $20 an apple, no thanks. Okay, I'll find I'll find something else to eat, right? But
Right.
you lower the price until the demand rises. But the calculation that people are doing is based on how hard they have to work to obtain. Everyone has a certain idea in their head how much work they're willing to do for one apple,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So, but if the government pays, it change like the amount of work people have to do changes that equation, right?
Right.
Okay, good.
So their next super chat, UM536 vids for $10 says the government of New York had to offer farmland grants as a signing bonus to soldiers to participate in the revolution. Why do that if the government sets prices by paying soldiers?
Well, first of all, I believe they were under the gold standard or something similar. I don't.
I mean, if we're talking about the revolution, obviously they were under the gold standard or something, right?
Well, Revolutionary War, we're talking about a completely different monetary system.
Right.
So I don't
Well, and
know.
also, if you said the government of New York, that's not the federal government, that's the state government.
Right.
So there's all sorts of different monetary systems that exist in the example that you brought forward. But,
Yeah, that I don't necessarily know are
yeah.
relevant for today. If the
Right.
government wants to hire you today to do whatever it is you do,
Mm-hmm.
they can just pay you at
Right.
whatever price they want to pay you.
Right.
And if they pay you $1,000 a minute, you're going to have a much different outlook on what products you're willing to pay, what you're willing to pay for different products than
Mm-hmm.
if they pay you $1,000 every 10 years. Right?
Right.
I mean, that makes sense. That's logical, right? Is my
Mm-hmm.
logic bad, Sitch? Or?
No, I mean, it makes sense to me. But
This is a big thing in economics. Where does the price level come from? Why are hamburgers $1.99? And everybody goes, okay, well, the ingredients, right? We add up the ingredients and the labor and all this stuff. Well,
mm-hmm.
why do all those things cost that? Well, those things because of the labor and like sooner or later, you got to get back to the big bang of the price level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you get back to the big bang, it's the government.
It's the government. Okay.
It's government
Which
spending.
triggers everyone who doesn't like the government.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
They're
so-
like, what? The government's setting prices?
So let me reconceptualizing this, thinking about how MMT is seeing the use of bonds.
Mm-hmm.
Do most MMT advocates are in favor of either some form of UBI or universal health care? Is that accurate?
No, totally incorrect. Most UBI,
Okay.
most MMTers are against UBI.
Okay, but they're in favor of universal health care.
Yeah,
Is that-
I mean, sure, a lot of them are
Okay.
lefties, but
Okay, well, I guess when they're printing all this money to pay for the health care, are they expecting?
The central policy proposal of MMTers is a jobs program where they want to take unemployment down to 0% because they want to offer a job to anyone who shows up to do a job. They're like,
Though they
there's
understand
so many
that
jobs.
they understand that's technically impossible, right?
Yeah.
Why?
Okay.
Well, because obviously not 100% of the population can work. But
Well,
Or-
no,
or-
hold
or
on,
will
hold on.
work.
That's not the proposal. You're straw manning the proposal.
I know, but that's what Mike
Not-
is conceptualizing.
I'm not trying to straw man the
Right.
proposal. I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding.
It would
We do
it'd be
not-
unemployment for people who want to work.
We do not,
Yeah.
hold on. First of
Right.
all, the definition of unemployment is the percentage of people who want a job and cannot find one. Okay.
Right,
We
right.
don't count housewives who don't have a job and don't want one as unemployed.
Right. Yeah, just making that clear.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Mike,
I guess if
Mike-
we're talking about that specific, okay.
I don't know.
I got you here.
I don't know if
So-
you have a job or you want or don't want a
Right,
job.
so- The main, it seemed like in Kelton's book anyway, the core issue was that MMT, and she's saying, is that our basic Fed policy right now is that there has to be some, like, was it 6-8% of the population who wants to work has to be kept unemployed
On unemployment,
order
yes.
to keep price
Inflation
stability
down.
and inflation at the level that it's at.
Right.
And she and their MMTers are saying you don't need to sacrifice that 8% of people to the gods of unemployment. You can have zero unemployment and maintain price stability.
They want to turn the unemployment office into the employment office. They're saying, why are we giving these people unemployment checks? Why don't we just hire them to fucking clean the park or, scrub the graffiti off the
Right.
neighborhoods, off the buildings in bad neighborhoods? Like, there's a million jobs that people could do, right?
Right.
When you look at some of these cities, I'm like, what? There's no job. No one can think of any jobs to do around here. This place is a shithole. How about we
But
clean it up?
You'd be putting that on the back of the federal, like, so those people would be federal employees. Are you saying that money would be sent to the states specifically enumerated to be spent on public works?
Well,
I mean,
they
either or, I guess.
They want to do it. Yes, they want to decentralize it as much as possible. They just want to finance it. They want to say, listen,
So I think,
hold on
I
a
think
sec.
the-
What's the
well, I
heavy
mean,
side for?
those-
A minute ago, you were all in favor of decentralization.
because those cities could have already fixed those problems if it wasn't for the fact that they're just corrupt as motherfuck, man. I mean, you don't have fucking shit and needles all over San Francisco because people don't want to work or can't find a job. It's because it's so fucking poorly managed.
Well, listen, the whole idea is you're going to say, we don't want you giving any unemployment out. We only want you giving jobs out. So, I mean,
I understand what the goal is. I think it's admirable. I think the practicality.
what are
of
you
actually
worried
seeing
about?
it play
You
out.
worried that the city planners are going to steal the money or something? I mean, what are you worried about?
Yeah. Fucking,
Then-
have you seen
then we
seen
throw-
fucking
then we
school
throw-
board members rolling around in fur jackets and limousines in Philadelphia? My dad has. That shit's real, dude. That money fucking disappears every fucking time.
You think they're stealing it from the federal government, or you think they're getting kickbacks from drug dealers?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
if I was in a government job, I'd be wary about stealing money from government coffers. I mean, obviously, if I'm a judge and I get
If you-
paid
if
to
you
look
guys are-
the
if
other
you guys are-
way on
because
some
if you guys are
criminal
friends-
prosecution,
If you guys are friends, just like, yeah, you guys both make out, you make out on the deal. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well,
I wonder how much of this conversation publicly and politically would change if we could enact incredibly strict prison sentences for government financial corruption.
they threw.
I wish that was the case.
Me too.
But
But I feel like maybe people would have a lot more faith in, paying the government or allowing government to get money to do shit. If there's like, oh, you skim from the government, you get some
There-
like insane penalty
there,
for this.
there were really strict penalties on releasing classified information, and Hillary
Right.
Clinton still walks
They
free.
threw they threw Blagojevich ass in jail for 10 years for fucking trying to sell Obama's Senate seat.
Yeah,
What
but that
are
was because that was so blatant, though. I mean,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, on top of that, it's these things sometimes, not all the time, sometimes get selectively enforced.
of
Sometimes
course.
you're going to have too much public pressure because of something so blatant.
You should watch
Sometime-
you should watch the interview with Blagojevich. It's super sus that he ended up in jail.
Oh, okay. I will admit I haven't seen it.
I would assume that in a lot of government places, there's a lot of skimming from government coffers, especially from federal government coffers, because there's so much money, it's hard to keep track of, and they're so big and
Yeah.
the pockets are so deep. So I would not be surprised if there's astronomical amounts of waste and corruption in these avenues.
I
areas.
look at the introduction to Dictator's Handbook though. They lay out that Bell, California county and how
Yes.
they ended up, they were basically corrupt as fuck and paying
Yes.
themselves on those boards,
Right.
but they had an elaborate scheme set up to do it. It wasn't necessarily easy, and eventually they were even found out. So I mean,
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember from Dictator's Handbook, wasn't they got way too greedy? I thought and that's part of the problem. Like
yes,
it became impossible to hide the amount of money they were taking
yes,
because it was
yeah.
so much. So, but anyway,
But they weren't.
Yes, sorry.
They weren't in that example
mm-hmm.
taking money from the federal government.
They were
was
taking it from the local
property tax money
yeah,
that
from
was
property
coming in
taxes.
from the local people.
Yeah,
Yes.
from local municipalities. Yeah,
Right. So I would assume, I think it's probably more difficult to steal federal government money. You're probably getting
maybe
Well,
for state
wait,
government people,
all-
but
all-
no, I don't know. I'm skeptical.
all you guys are doing is doing a gut check. This
You're
is
right,
based
you're
on
right.
zero
You are
fucking
100%
evidence.
right.
All
I mean,
you're
we're-
doing
we're-
is saying,
completely
well,
correct.
So if you're going to
doing
give
a
me a
gut
well,
check.
at least give me something other than I pulled it out of my ass. Okay.
I don't know. People point to the $1,000 screws. And,
Now
you know,
you're going to cite Independence Day. Okay. So your evidence is the movie Independence Day.
no. Did they talk about that on Independence Day? Oh, you're
Yes.
right. They did. Yes.
$1,000.
I thought there was. I could have swore. I could be wrong. It's in my gut here. I could have swore that when people were looking at the Iraq War with Halliburton, there was a lot of very expensive, like hammers and screws. And that's where that line from Independence Day came from. Was from something real. That this actually did happen.
I know a lot about the government waste in Iraq from fucking Dictator's Handbook.
Right.
Obviously, I've read that book more than you. I think I've read it multiple times.
I've read it once. Okay.
But they talk about how, they would throw money at problems, but the money would eventually end up in the Iraqis' hands. And
Right, but
that's
that was-
when it fucking
right.
vanished. And
But
had no.
they talked about it mostly like the federal government would end up paying the Iraqi government, and that the corruption of the Iraqi government would get all fucked
was
up.
the problem.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But I could have swore there was some big, I don't remember. I mean, I have to look into this. I could have swore there's some big controversy with Halliburton and a lot of other no bid government contractors who were just obviously skimming money from the government. But
Well, all of this depends upon your personal. There's a little adjustment switch in all of us
Mhm.
where we think the level of American government corruption is.
yes.
And I think a lot of people, Mike, I'm looking at you, has it set on 10 out of 10
No, not that high.
without
But, I
any
mean,
real
it's up there.
justification. Why don't
It was
Okay, I do not have the specific elements to cite right now. Forgive me, I wasn't prepared for this portion.
how
Why-
dare you?
I don't necessarily know. I mean, maybe it's a 10, maybe it's a 1. I don't know.
My gut says it's not a 10. I would be highly fucking suspect if it was a 10. But
Mhm.
I mean, I'm thinking more. I mean, if we're gonna go 1 to 10, maybe a 5 to a 7, depending upon what part of the country you're in.
I've read a lot about a lot of government corruption and government scams and shit like that. They talk about it in that book, The Price We Pay. These doctors going to churches and basically finding people who can have this procedure that's paid for by Medicare if they're a certain age. So they're basically
Yeah, but that's people scamming the government.
yes,
It's a little bit different. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't be surprised actually if, in terms of like government employees or government workers scamming the public, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more corruption on state level, substantially more corruption on state level than on the federal level.
It varies state to state as well.
Well, yeah, obviously, because it seems like it's way easier to get away with it on the state level,
Right,
than the
because
federal level.
they send you a bunch of money for Katrina, and you're like, oh well, okay, half this money goes to the levees,
Right.
and half of it goes to my estate.
Or remember the what's the really fat New Jersey governor's name again? Chris
Oh,
Christie,
Chris
remember?
Christie.
Yeah, I remember the whole
Beach
thing
man.
where he like closed the bridge down and everyone was like, what? And it was like
Yep.
like exposed some like insanely large corruption scheme that he never got in trouble for.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, it was like years ago.
Well, but this is the thing, because all this came about the unemployment thing. So if you're giving states a certain amount of money to keep unemployment at 0%, like you literally, nobody could call Washington and say, "Hey, I'm in Mississippi and they won't give me a fucking job." Then you have some sort of, pressure there, right? You've got some
Right.
sort of way to monitor the situation.
Okay.
Not to say, I mean, they could give them a lot more money and they could not use that money to hire people or pay people less or whatever. And that could happen.
To answer the chat, the line that Adam's talking about is from the first Independence Day movie. It's when Goldblum, what's his name?
Jeff Goldblum's
Jeff
dad.
Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum's dad. Yes.
Taxi Man.
Yes.
He says, of course, he says that's how they funded Area 51. Is that, they'd say it was $1,000 for a screw and the extra money goes to Area 51.
Right.
So.
I like the fact that in that movie they made the pitch that the money wasn't actually wasted.
It was going somewhere valuable. Yes.
Yes. What do you
greatest
think? The
fiction of them
government's?
all.
You think they're idiots? You think they really pay $500 for a hammer?
Nope. That's funny. Brain for $5 says, I will gladly pay you for 2 hamburgers tomorrow for a hamburger today. MMT was invented by Wimpy from Popeye. It's a scam. There you go. Brain doesn't like MMT.
I don't think that's the best.
Nobody
faith
likes
interpretation.
MMT. What, Mike, is MMT useful though as a lens to at least look at these things? I mean, I feel like
I would agree it's useful as a lens. Yeah, because like it provides you a better understanding of how it's actually currently working. I'll fully agree with that.
Yeah.
Dragon High Tide for $20. Thank you, Dragon. Says, why would the government ever demand units of money for taxes unless that money had value prior to the demand for taxes? Money has social value well outside of Jack Boots demanding I hand it over.
I mean, that's the boiled down version of kind of where I come from, I'd say. That super chat.
Adam, do you have a response to that?
I mean, I just disagree. You're just saying you're saying money has value outside of the Jack Boots. You're
Why
saying
would the
money
government demand money?
I guess if I was gonna make a an argument in favor of Adam's side, the government isn't a business. It's a social entity that moves based upon the fact that it hands out these tokens to then ask for them back. By having that demand, they force people to act and move through the economy.
Money creates the market, though. Money supply is the market. I mean, that's what creates the market.
Well, let me answer the question. I think if you're talking about if the currency is pegged to gold, then yes, obviously if the currency is pegged to gold, it's a little bit more complicated because then the money's value is not just to paying taxes to your own government; it's to paying taxes to any government, really, essentially, or any government that accepts gold. So yes, if the money is pegged to gold, it would have value outside of each individual government. However, if it's not pegged to gold, if it's pegged to nothing, but the value of the government for the country you exist in, then no, it is only to pay taxes. And the reason the government demands units of money is to incentivize and de-incentivize specific kinds of behaviors and to keep inflation down, really. So that would be my answer.
That sounds sexy to me.
They also said,
how dare you try to incentivize behavior, Sitch, you jackbooted thug.
Well, see, we can really trigger libertarians now. We'll say taxation isn't theft. Taxation is the vehicle to keep inflation low. And then they'll be very upset.
Taxation is value. There you go.
Taxation. There you go. Taxation is value.
Oh, yeah. I want to fucking kill myself now.
Yeah, I know.
Why did I do that?
You want to abolish taxes? What you want? You want inflation to go rampant? You idiot.
Well, this is the straw man version of MMT that they always say. They're like, inflation. MMT doesn't care about inflation. MMT is monomaniacally focused on inflation. That's all MMT cares about.
Right. Dagon Oh, it's Dagan, not Dragon. Dagan also said it's more than just, quote, money should be an investment vehicle. If the government can print money arbitrarily, it can circumvent the limits of taxation and engage in nefarious, unsanctioned behavior. Well, I don't think Adam or MMT is saying printing money, that they can print money arbitrarily. They're saying that the debt doesn't matter, that inflation is the limiting factor for printing money, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
So
not.
it's
It's no
right.
by no means arbitrary.
Right. So MMT said, so I guess that's where the confusion comes from because MMT says the debt is stupid and don't think about it. It doesn't matter. And then people think they conflate that to think you mean that you can print money. And you're saying, no, I'm just saying that inflation is the limiting mechanism, not the debt.
Are we isolating that way of looking at things from the budget, the government budget?
Right.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Like,
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I guess that would then bring in the other question with like massively increased government spending. Does the Fed have a choice?
I don't think the Fed, I think the Fed doesn't have a choice if if Congress passes laws, right? The Fed just has to do whatever they say.
Okay,
Right?
I guess
think
that's
so.
I guess that's
that's
a
how it
fundamental problem, but I don't know if that's really a problem with the Fed at that point.
Well,
Well, it's not the Fed's fault.
the Fed
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the government has given the Fed a job that's kind of impossible to do with the current situation, with their current understanding of taxing and spending, because ultimately, and this came up in my conversation with Econoboy because he kept saying, I want an independent Fed, independent of politics and the government. And I kept saying, well, that's impossible because the Congress writes the spending bills. And ultimately, the spending bills are what creates inflation or doesn't create inflation because the Fed only has a certain number of tools to control. Like the Fed doesn't write tax policy. They can't tax the money away and shrink the money supply,
Correct.
right? All they can do is they
can do interest rates and they can do
right
the reserve ratio.
So the money supply is spending or lending. All the Fed can control is lending because they can raise interest rates and dissuade people from taking out loans.
But they can also just not approve loans, right?
Not necessarily, because the private banks are doing that, and their arrangement is like they just provide the money. The private banks approve the loans or not.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but every loan that comes from a bank has to be approved by the Fed because the Fed has to print that money. Correct? Am I wrong on that?
Yes.
Or am I right? Okay.
If you go
okay.
to a bank and you're credit worthy and you say, I'm going to start a restaurant or whatever, if it looks like a good investment, of course they're going to give you the loan, because why wouldn't they want to? You're going to hire people. You're going to increase.
The Fed have to sign off on all those loans, or
their arrangement is yes, they do. They basically are like a franchise. Yes.
Oh, okay.
But it's a good policy because why wouldn't you do that?
Right.
Well, in the event that you want to not increase the money supply because there's too much federal spending.
Listen, why would you not? If 20 people come to you and they want to start 20 new restaurants in your neighborhood, why would you not want those 20 new restaurants? Like, that's so much economic activity. That's great.
I'm with you there. I'm just throwing out hypotheticals. That's all.
Stug from $5 in all caps.
Oh shit.
Says it is dumb to say that the quote debt doesn't matter if it is perhaps the primary thing determining inflation. The tagline is as dumb as defund the police. Well, isn't it? It's not that the debt. Isn't it that the debt works inverse to how people think? That debt actually prevents inflation.
Well, the debt is the money supply / the savings of everyone.
Well, no, debt is the vehicle to prevent inflation.
Right. That's the way you're conceptualizing it now.
But isn't that true?
To a certain extent, yeah, of course.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess when I say the debt doesn't matter, it's what I mean is that generally when people think of debt, they think of like, oh, the government is putting us all in debt in order to spend our money. And that's not what's happening at all. The government is creating debt in order to prevent inflation from getting out of hand. Because the government has to increase the money supply so people have money to buy shit.
Well,
and I guess that's why they peg the debt to the money supply. Because I mean that is what it is. But.
And the economy's growing. Like,
Right.
think about if you're playing a game of Monopoly and the game of Monopoly is getting bigger and bigger. We're expanding the board as we go. You know,
Right.
it's a normal size with, I don't know how many, 100 properties. Now it's 1,000 properties. Now it's 10,000 properties. If we only have the money supply that's in the fucking box, we're in big trouble, right?
Right. Yes.
Like pretty
yes.
soon we're like, holy shit. And this is a good example of the infinite fractionability of the money supply, because, you know, Mike might say, well, it's just Bitcoin right now. You know, now a property is a 1/1 millionth of a dollar bill. It's still like, I don't know that helps our situation.
Stug clarified for $5 saying, note, I'm not saying MMT is wrong on the debt issue, just saying that the tagline is dumb. I understand what you're saying. But I'm referring to the way in which people conceptualize debt is, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's not useless. The debt isn't arbitrary, but it's not what people think it is. So if you want to be hyper pedantic,
well, and I go.
I think it's important to use words that are accurate. Just
fuck you. I'm going to use words that are not accurate. Okay, I do what I want.
Okay,
I guess
so much for Sitch's law.
She says deficits don't matter. It's called the deficit myth. It's not called the debt myth. So that's another thing.
Well, but the debt is the national deficit.
Right.
The same thing.
Yeah. The collective deficits over each budget.
Right. It's not that they don't matter the way people think they matter. Okay, that would be the more accurate way. Okay, it's not as clickbaity. Give me a break. Brain for $5 says, thank goodness I got my $1,000 check so that I can pay it back in taxes and watch rich people buy bonds and become even richer in the process. Thanks, MMT.
Yeah, no, the stuff that they did during the pandemic and the stuff Biden is proposing and all this Build Back Better bullshit is just, Stephanie Kelton wrote a huge article in the New York Times about how Build Back Better was going to cause massive inflation, and now it is. And everyone's going, this is MMT.
Well, to be fair, I thought she said it would cause inflation over like 10, 20 years. The inflation we're experiencing now is not from that. It's from COVID, supply chain disruption.
Right.
But I mean, this was help.
Build Back Better never passed either.
I thought it did. Well, some of it did.
Did it?
So
I don't think it did.
Parts of it did. I could have sworn.
So if what's going on with Biden isn't MMT sanctioned, is like the bad thing to do, what the fuck is he doing then? What is he following?
He's trying to get reelected, so he's giving out a bunch of perks to his voters.
He's following the normal economic structures that everyone follows. That is not MMT.
Yeah, Dictator's Handbook is what he's doing.
Okay.
He's like, I want young people to vote for me, so let me forget their student debt. It'll totally blow up inflation, but I don't care. I'm fucking...
So you keeping in mind that I'm used to just hearing from the MMT side of the conversation, spend. I'm curious to know the distinction of why you disapprove of what's going on with Biden. So that's why I asked if that makes any sense. I think it's good to clarify, especially for people who come more from a libertarian side of things like I do.
Yeah, Biden signs $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill into law. Yeah, because remember it got broken up into multiple pieces.
Right. Yeah, 1.8.
Yeah, one of them passed and then one of them didn't pass. So, Brain for another $2 says Adam is pro Putin confirmed. Clip it, CT.
Oh, I didn't like that. Stop it, Brain.
Joe the Mig for $7, thank you, says Adam seems to be ignoring the fact that the dollar is backstopped by the price of oil. The petrodollar is a thing.
It's kind of what you were talking about with the whole Putin situation, having people buy it in rubles. Yeah,
the fact that we're the reserve currency does provide a lot of stability to the dollar. A lot of international contracts are written for oil. Like France is buying oil from Russia and they're denominating those contracts in dollars. Like we're not even involved in the fucking transaction, but they're using dollars. I mean, that's pretty helpful, right?
Right.
That's
That helps us. It doesn't really negate any of the MMT conversation.
no,
that
it
we're
doesn't.
having.
This is
So-
the thing about the value. People perceive the value is other people want this. That's why I want it. They don't necessarily perceive that the reason people want it is because of taxes.
Right.
But ultimately, I think it is.
And you'd say, well, why do people buy oil in U.S. dollars? And you say, well, because the U.S. military and the U.S. government makes you. So,
Well, not only that, it's proof that they have confidence in the Federal
Right.
Reserve
yeah,
doing
I guess they don't
its
make you.
job.
I shouldn't say that. That's the wrong way to frame it. It's
Well,
there's confidence and stability of the U.S. government.
Well, they can listen. If I'm going to do an oil contract
right.
between France and Russia, and I am using dollars, I'm using them for some pragmatic reason, right?
Right.
The stability of the dollar, the fact that the Fed is creating price stability in the dollar, I think is probably part of that equation. Like
Yeah,
if
of
you're
course.
doing a massive transaction in Bitcoin, and the transaction goes through and Bitcoin is at 60,000, and then the next day it's at 40,000, you're kind of going, well, I probably should have used dollars.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Brain for $5 says Adam demands your cooperation so MMT can work. He is an economic monarchist. All hail the Fed. I hope the Fed doesn't come for my wife. LOL.
Yeah, watch out.
There you go.
That Alan Greenspan, he looks like
He's
a
quite
randy
the
one.
charmer. Yeah. JMac for 20. Well, I don't know. He was a simp for Ayn Rand, and apparently she had an open relationship. So you never know. Bunch of degenerates.
Wow.
JMac for $20. Thank you so much, Jay. Says Adam, the government is going to pay $1,000 for the hammer because they don't bargain down prices because they are guaranteed from their budget. I tried to get prices down for tools in the in the Air Force, and I was told as such. Well, there you go.
Yeah, they overpay because they're basically giving a perk to their constituents.
Okay. Well, see,
sense.
but that's part of the problem that we're talking about.
Yeah.
The $100 hammers.
It's
$1,000 hammers.
So we should just get rid of government.
Okay, well, let's not Kathy Newman.
Oh,
but,
that sounds fucking great to me.
So what
There
you're
you go.
so what you're saying is you want to get rid of government, Sitch, basically.
That's what I'm saying. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Novin Leon for $5 says money derives its value from its utility, a substitute for trading grain, livestock, etc. Kings would tax their subjects in grain, now in money. Yeah, I mean I think that basically conforms with what we were saying.
Yeah. They tax my livestock.
Right.
And daughters.
J-Mac, thank you so much for joining the Free Will Seekers. Daddy.
I thought J-Mac already was in the Free Will Seekers. Does it do that every month?
No, he just joined.
Did he join again?
No, he was. I don't think Jay ever joined officially. He was just giving us shit tons of money because he's our central bank. But
I thought he did join because I used it in the video. I remember it being in the video.
I don't know then. Maybe he joined and left, and now he joined again.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, my peak curiosity. What the fuck does Jay do? Holy shit, man. Always seeing these massive super chats.
I don't know, Jay, you have to ask.
Jay
wants to tell you in the chat.
Jay works for the Federal Reserve. He's a he's a Federal Reserve banker.
Jay is a crypto millionaire, probably.
Just fucking printing out new dollars every time he super chats.
Brain for $2 says, "What's the value of your comic that doesn't exist yet?"
What's the value of the comic? That's the question.
Yes.
Our comic is going to be fucking badass.
That's right. America's Big Fat Debt for $5 says, the more I listen to Adam try to explain MMT, the more he sounds like the Rick and Morty copy pasta. Quote, you don't have the intellect for MMT.
Okay, that's the other thing that so much of the MMT advocates, like, they always come in sounding like they think they're the smartest fucking person in the room.
It's terrible. I gotta work on it.
It is annoying.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam, I'm not blaming you specifically because I know sometimes when you get in debates, this is just how you do it. I've seen enough of these.
I gotta change though. I gotta fix it. It's bad.
I mean, Okay, well, at
I
least in
sound
my
like a
personal-
condescending prick, Mike. I'm telling you.
At least in my personal interaction, like I just know this is what you do. I'm not taking any of that personally. Like I don't give a shit myself. But I'm talking like especially like what the fuck's his name? L something Ray, whatever his name is.
L. Randall Ray.
Yeah, he's I can't listen to him.
He
I
is.
really can't.
He's worse than me. He's
Arguably.
a lot worse than me. Actually, Steve Keen is like the worst. Oh man,
I don't think I've listened to that guy
he's
yet.
so condescending.
It's fucking insufferable, and that's part of where like I guess the personality types that really tend more in that direction, I feel like they are just kind of the elitist types who want to be the ones sitting there pulling all the fucking levers because they think they're smarter than everyone else. I don't like personality types like that in charge.
Right.
You know?
Is it?
It's bothersome.
I mean, we technically are smarter than everyone else. So I mean,
fuck. Then in that case,
well, everyone else just has a bad model. They have a model that's basically the flat Earth model. And what are we supposed to do, Mike?
all right. Let's even say for your argument of the lens, it's an Earth-centric universe model as opposed to a heliocentric universe model.
Sure, okay. So it's not as bad as flat Earth then.
No.
At least they know. At least they know it's a planet, right?
I feel like when I hear any economist speak, it's always condescending. I think that's just kind of the nature of the field. But
Okay, that and also
Austrians are
arguing
worse,
against dude, fucking okay. Bob Murphy, I love the guy, and like I hang out with a ton of fucking Mises Caucus people, so keep this in mind too. But fucking Bob Murphy is the worst in economic debates because it's always just like, but the Austrian economics is right, you know. Like every time his argument is only from like the point, the appeal to authority that the Austrian side is correct. He never gets down into the nitty gritty of it.
Interesting.
It hurts.
Have you watched the Bob Murphy Roland Gray talk though? Because they do get into the nitty gritty. I think it might be like 3 hours long, and it is amazing. Yeah.
Okay, word. Yeah, I'll definitely check that.
Here, I'll look it up. I'll look it up and I'll drop it.
Is
in
that the one I listened to? Because that was really
thank
good.
you. Yes.
Yeah.
Say that again, Sitch?
Definitely, it's the one
I listened to that. It was a really good talk. They really get into like some hyper specific economic stuff.
I followed Roland Gray after that, and he's fucking bad mouthing Elon on Twitter, and I'm like, why?
I did want to ask you guys about that. Forget how do you guys think that Elon is actually going to legit fix Twitter?
Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's not fixable, but I think he'll try. I think he has mostly good intentions. That
seems to be my point of view as well. I got some fucking some of the more skeptical Austrian guys thinking it's just a play for money at the end of the day, not actually any no substantive changes.
I'm not sure. Like, well, I mean, first of all, I mean, you know, Elon already has a shit zillion dollars, and he's spending $44 billion on this or whatever it is.
Shitload of money.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like a money thing to me. It really does seem like an ideological buy, in my estimation. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm naive, but I think it's more likely that maybe the system of whatever Twitter is becomes too like it's unmanageable, and maybe you won't be able to change it. But
that's like, how many people is he going to have to lay off before it just becomes not workable because the system's just that infected with?
Why don't? Yeah, we'll find out. It'll be very interesting. We'll get to see what happens.
If Twitter fails, I'm not going to fucking cry. I'll tell you that. It's
right.
a fucking cesspool.
So it's interesting because Elon's sort of tied in. He kind of has to have a Twitter change because he's basically tied his entire reputation into enacting some positive change on Twitter's end. And I think if he can't, it will actually have negative financial effects for all of his businesses.
Oh,
that's something I hadn't considered.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Because he'll be seen as having a giant loss of credibility if he can't really do anything productive with Twitter.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah.
So we'll see. Dagon High Tide for $5 says legal tender laws ban the use of foreign currency. Crypto exists in a legal gray area, making its adoption very risky. Government has its thumb on the scale. Well, there you go. I mean, that makes sense. That does make sense.
The government is the scale. I know that's triggering, huh?
Right, but you're saying the government prevents, currency competition, which of course they would, because it would, like, why would they want there to be competition with their own currency?
You could create more instability that way, giving the best possible argument to MMT.
Well, I'm just, from the government's perspective, they would gain zero benefit from allowing competing currencies. So, Adam just linked in the chat the episode.
Yeah.
And I am going to fucking
Rohan Gray. I thought it was Roland. Rohan Gray. Yeah, I followed him on Twitter after that, and all these MMT economists are giant lefties.
Yes. That's the other thing I noticed.
I guess I
think it's ad hoc, though. It's because it conforms with a worldview in which you can justify
government
spending. Yeah. And you kind of shit on the main Republican counter argument to spending, which is the debt.
You're right.
Yep.
You're totally right.
So I do think it's all entirely just ad hoc.
Mark Blythe is an interesting character because he seems to be on the left, but definitely not in the leftist bubble.
And he's also like, he kind of has a soft agreement on MMT. He's not like a huge MMT guy or anything.
No, but he does accept it.
He accepts it for America. I don't know if he says he doesn't know if he accepts it for any other country.
Right.
That's interesting.
So that is, Well, it's because of the petrodollar and all that other stuff. Bjorn Kazark for $5. Oh no, I'll read that one later. That's about abortion. Gene, the angry penguin, for $2 says, everyone knows artists can't math. That is true. That is true.
I play Prague. I math for a living.
Yonkers OF for $8 Aussie says, how do we pay interest on bonds if the bonds are the debt/difference between annual tax income and actual spending?
Say that again.
How do we pay interest on bonds if the bonds are the debt/difference between the annual tax income and actual spending?
We just print the money and pay the interest. I mean,
it's because the answer is because the economy the growth of the economy outpaces the interest on the bonds, and that's kind of what a lot of the people on the right who are very anti the debt say, is that, well, what if one day the growth of the economy doesn't outpace the interest rate or the interest payments for bonds, and then the economy will collapse. That's basically the doomsday scenario that they lay out.
That's their argument, but we don't.
Right.
This is the thing. We're under no obligation to give those bonds. We give those bonds because we want to fight inflation. But if we don't want to fight inflation, we don't have to get the bonds out. We just.
Well, it's true. I mean, you're right. The doomsday scenario could actually never occur, because what would occur would be the government would just print money to pay it off. Now that would create inflation, but the U.S. would never ever actually have to ever default on its debts.
Right.
It would just create inflation, which is why I got so triggered and why I kind of despised Ted Cruz when he was trying to make the government default on its debt just to do his stupid debt ceiling bullshit.
Right, because you had learned MMT and you knew he was just.
Well, it was even before
games.
MMT. I mean, the debt ceiling is stupid regardless of whether MMT is true or not. But
yeah, because we just print the money out.
Well, even before that, just because if you want to have the government not spend money, then you have to fight with that. When you create the bill for the government to spend the money, you don't fight with that after the government has spent the money and then talk about whether you're going to pay the money back.
Do you know the real reason why the government fights over spending money, Sitch?
For political reasons. I don't know. What are you asking me?
Well, because it's straight dictator's handbook stuff. You don't want your competition when you're out of power spending a bunch of money on their winning coalition.
Because then people will say, I want to be on that coalition. Look at what they're getting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you fight for them not to spend money on their coalition while they're fighting to spend money on their coalition. This is why Biden wants to forgive student loan debt. He's like,
Yeah.
that's my coalition. Of course I want them. And the Republicans don't want that. They're like, you think we want a bunch of fucking 20-somethings showing up and voting for Democrats in November? Fuck that. But that's
Right.
really, like, it's so divorced from actually, spending money on good things or spending money efficiently or, trying to run a good economy. All that completely immaterial.
Right.
It's so sad.
Godfoot and Friends for $20. Thank you so much, Godfoot. Says, never thought I'd see that snob SOB Mike here. Nice.
Uh-oh. You got a hater.
Got a hater.
It's probably a lover.
I think it was a lover too.
We use the word lovingly.
Okay.
I need to go back to our DMs, Mike, because I think they're kind of hilarious.
Sure, fucking open them up. Fucking do it up, man.
Drama there. Novin Leon for $10 says, quote, need funding for something? Great, here you go. What? You didn't use it all? Next time I won't give you as much. That's why people always find ways to use money, hence the $1,000 screws. That's definitely true for budgets. That's definitely true for budgets, yes.
Spending money is good.
Well, just that, this is true for private. This isn't just for the government. It's true for private budgets. If you underspend your budget, you're penalized by that because then they just don't give you as much next time around.
They're like, good job.
Yeah, reverse incentives. The problem. Anthony J for $5 says it's hard to comprehend someone being more condescending than Vosh. That is true.
Was that me?
Well, no, you're talking about the MMT economist people.
Is Vosh pro MMT?
I
don't
have no
know.
idea. Hopefully,
Adam is praying that he's not.
Yeah, I don't want Vosh ever to discover MMT.
I know, like whenever I think you sent me a DM one time. It was like you found some article where AOC. Oh, it was when AOC interviewed Stephanie Kelton, and Adam sends me this DM. He's like, no. He's like, don't let the commies take MMT, please. No.
AOC popularized MMT.
She
I was
did.
gonna say, yeah, they were the ones pushing it the most, I would say.
I know. But I think they do have an incorrect conception of it because they do, I think, look at it like a magic
Infinite,
money printer.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that's how they conceptualize it. Chris Jones for $5 says, I've had jobs where I was paid under the table, and my response when I get the money wasn't to refuse a paycheck because I wasn't paying taxes on it. Oh, okay.
Got us.
I don't understand what they're saying.
Here's the thing, though. You can say that. You can be like, I work, I get all my money in cash, and I never pay taxes, right? But I still need money to live. Well, the reason that money is valuable, the reason that the grocery store takes that money from you when you buy your gallon of milk and loaf of bread is because the grocery store is going to pay taxes with it.
Yeah.
So somewhere along the chain, like, taxes come into play.
I didn't realize that was supposed to be a refutation of the government of why money has value.
It is. It totally is. Yeah.
Well, it's not, but that was the purpose of it. Yeah, you're right. Okay. That's not true at all. Anyway, sorry, Mike.
You're good.
What were you going to say?
Oh, just agreeing with Adam. Like at the end of the day, the larger businesses that are going to pay shitloads of money is really where it's going to go.
Someone has to pay taxes at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
The reason the money's valuable is because someone's paying taxes.
Mm-hmm. Arithmus for $1 says, Adam, doesn't the market also set prices levels? The government may set the wages for government jobs, but private companies bidding on government contracts also set the price level in their respective industries. It seems more symbiotic than you suggest.
Well, the private industry and the government are both bidding on labor. So this is the thing. The government, since they make the money, could bid whatever they want on labor. They could outbid private industry. If private industry is paying $100,000 a year for doctors, they could pay $200,000 a year for doctors, and all the doctors would say, I'd rather work for the government than the private industry. That would be a bad policy. because they, obviously, why would you want to? That would be inflationary. That would drive up prices.
Okay. Magor for $1 says, if you're afraid of apocalyptic inflation and want some investment advice, I have some to share. Buy tools and learn how to use them. The ability to create and repair will always be valuable no matter the economic condition.
True. Yeah, very much so.
Based.
Working towards that deflationary spiral that we all love.
NSX Aussie Media for $21.20. Thank you. Says, you guys have a good thing going with your show. Good dynamic between you both. I appreciate that you often disagree and then calmly discuss/dissect the topic together. You seem nonpartisan and refreshing. Great stuff, guys. From Future Man Mao 5. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that's his long way of saying you guys are Team Truth.
That it is. Even though we get very triggered at each other often. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Truth is triggering, man.
Truth is triggering. That's right. Okay, I think we've reached the end of our
The Bob Murphy
MMT
Show, episode 134.
donation.
Sorry to fucking nuke your stream with the most interesting conversation in the world.
Listen, Adam actually wants less people to watch the stream live so that more people watch the clips during the week. That's the secret goal here.
That's fair. Okay, that's fair.
I was actually excited.
Now, I call Adam stupid for wanting that, but that's me.
I was excited to talk about MMT. Are you kidding me?
I know. Listen, sometimes you got to do things not for money, not for tax purposes, not for the views, but just out of the interest level. And Adam's a big MMT nerd, so he will talk about it with anyone endlessly.
We have scheduled one of my favorite podcast hosts, Christian Riley from the MMT podcast. And this guy really knows his stuff. His podcast co-host, Patricia Pino, I believe is her name. She's an economist. She's got a degree. She might even have a PhD. Their podcast is really good. They are super on the left, which I have a difficult time recommending it because they say things that I know will trigger people in our audience. So it's tough because if you want to learn about MMT and you're on the right, it's like nothing I can send them. This is completely monopolized by people on the left. So I want to talk to Christian about that when he comes on. I mean, there's a few things he said that just really, there was this one podcast and he does the intro. The intros are always super funny. He does a lot of jokes. He's a comedian as well. So he's super funny. But some of the jokes are definitely at conservatives' expense. He did one that he was making a bunch of jokes about Trump being a racist. And I was like, this is just like you've completely lost your entire conservative audience. And this is something I feel should be nonpartisan, but I don't know. I don't know how. Go ahead, Mike.
I think there's an argument to say, at very least, the lens should definitely be nonpartisan. As far as the policy, I mean, obviously the shit I'm talking about against it is relatively radical. I mean, I would fully agree with that as well. Like I'm coming from a more radical point of view, but I think even still, I think it would be partisan at the end of the day, just because people they're going to see the word debt and they're going to think fiscal responsibility. And trying to explain this to stay-at-home mom who's in charge of the budget, it's going to go right over their head.
But austerity is fiscal irresponsibility. If you're rich and you have money to invest and you're not buying stocks when the market is down, that is irresponsible. That is completely irresponsible.
You could conceive it that way.
You're supposed to be buying low and selling high. Why wouldn't you want the government to do the same thing? If the government can buy a bridge at the top of the business cycle for $100,000 and they can buy a bridge for $1,000 at the bottom of the business cycle, why the hell are they buying the $100,000 bridge? That's irresponsible.
I mean, yeah. I get what you're saying. Sometimes you just need to buy the bridge.
Yeah, all of the conversations about fiscal responsibility, they're so triggering to me because they're advocating for things that are fiscally irresponsible. And you would never advocate for in a business context.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm basically trying to say is I don't think you're going to convince them. That's why it's going to be a partisan issue.
Yeah, but
like, I'm not.
It's the same.
That is true. That is true.
It's the same. I have the same. It's the same thing that triggers me about the anti-theist. It's like you're standing under the banner of science, yet you completely throw science out the window just because you hate religion. You know, these people are standing under the banner of fiscal responsibility, and they completely throw fiscal responsibility out the window just because they hate government spending. It's
triggering.
Sad.
Well, I've laid it out.
Okay. Fair enough. America's Big Fat Debt for $2 says, how is MMT not economic elite theory, aka distributists?
This is another thing.
What is the difference between, the Italian elite theory and MMT?
I'm glad you brought this up because there were other comments.
Mm-hmm.
There are other comments comparing selectorate theory to elite theory. There's a giant difference between selectorate theory and elite theory. There is overlap between selectorate theory and elite theory.
Mm-hmm.
But the giant difference is elite theory states that democratic processes are irrelevant. You can't separate democratic processes from selectorate theory. Democratic processes are like the root of selectorate theory, and elite theory says that they're immaterial. So you're never going to overcome that hurdle, no matter how many similarities you point out between the two.
So I don't know enough about elite theory to comment, but what you're saying is that basically elite theory is descriptively wrong, MMT is descriptively correct.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily know how America's Big Fat Debt is making the connection.
Well, I'm assuming it's sort of based on, like, when people who don't like MMT think about MMT, it's sort of, I think, conceptualized like you're giving the elites more control over the money supply or more control over some monetary aspect of our society, and so
to accomplish
that's how
a
it gets
goal,
equated.
We give the military a lot of power because we say, listen, we don't want anyone invading the country, right? I mean, this is the thing. The government has to be as big as it has to be to accomplish whatever goals you want to accomplish. The goals always come first, right? Protect us from Russia is the goal. Well, the government needs to be a certain size to be able to do that, right? Fight this cyber war, right? Russia's trying to shut down all of our power plants from a distance, right? Well, the government has to be a certain size. This is why I was triggered with what Mike was saying, because listen, if you want price stability, you need somebody there that's keeping track of this stuff and paying attention to the problem and working on it, right? Mike is going to call that guy an elite, a shadowy elite doing like, look, if you want detectives to solve murders, they have to have certain powers to be able to do that. Yes, they can abuse those powers, but do you want the fucking murder solved or what? Like,
I think you can also argue the Lord Acton principle, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right, and I completely 100% agree with you. But there's only two paths forward there. You say, listen, we don't care about price stability anymore because it's too scary. Or you say, listen, we're too scared that the military is going to turn the guns on their citizens, so we're disbanding the military. The problem is next door, they have a military. They're going to come in and take us over.
You could argue. Well, I guess that's not a good argument. I was going to say military competition between states is what keeps them defending their people, but really that just comes down to actual the spirit of nationalism, I would say, the spirit of countryhood.
I mean, this is the same thing with law enforcement. You're like, wait, they have guns and they can detain you and stuff
Well,
like that. It's like, okay.
I think what you brought up is an interesting thing because I've actually seen people in our chat say this in the past about MMT, is that even they'll say something like, MMT might be correct, but it's more useful for Congress to have this useful fiction about the debt mattering to prevent them from abusing their power. And I think that's the way a lot of people feel about this.
Sounds fair.
I mean, what is the difference? Listen, there is a monster out there that they're worried about because it interferes with their chances of getting reelected. They're just scared of the wrong monster, right? The monster is the inflation monster. It's not the debt monster.
Mm-hmm.
How is it not? I mean, there's still a monster that is a force to be reckoned with.
I know, I understand. I'm just saying that's what the argument that I've heard being made repeatedly.
Well, no, I understand that. They're saying listen, we have this debt monster and we have to keep using this debt monster because it keeps.
Yeah. And you're saying the inflation monster does the same job, but it's actually true.
Is actually true and
right.
is just as bad. You think Biden laughing about inflation at the press corps, like, you think that's good for his reelection chances?
No, yeah.
And I think inflation is, listen, the debt is kind of this nebulous thing that libertarians worry about. Look, inflation, everybody worries about.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of your opinion on the debt, you could be a progressive, person who doesn't even think about the debt. Your inflation is going to force you to think about the economy.
Right. Okay. Drew Cox for $20. Thank you, Drew. Says MMT is inherently left-wing because it requires massive government involvement / intervention, which the right considers incompetent. I feel like it doesn't, though. I feel like it doesn't require any more or less government intervention than what we currently have right now.
That's because we're having MMT right now.
Well, no, because again, MMT is descriptive. Like if you were to talk about like the prescription of having a jobs program, then yes, obviously that would create, large government involvement in that. But just acknowledging that MMT is the way the economy works doesn't change anything really in terms of government intervention or involvement.
Yeah, you would have to implement a jobs program. We have a jobs program.
Right.
We have a jobs program.
Well,
now. It's called
but
military.
I mean one associated with a more MMT framework.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Evidently the military has stricter hiring requirements.
Right. When you say we have a jobs program, you mean the military.
Yeah, I do mean the military.
Yes. Right.
If you just open the military up to anyone, I guess that could be your jobs program, right?
It could be. That'd be interesting.
Well, listen.
Hey, I'm the one that said everyone should have to serve in the
I know,
military
that's what I was going to say.
Like a government jobs corps program.
That's what I was going to say. How about that's the jobs program?
There you go.
Your Peace Corps, whatever. Your beatnik Peace Corps thing.
Yep. Novin Leon for $10 says, the right wants fiscal responsibility because they want to restrain the government. They don't want the government to behave like a successful business that is continually growing in size. I think that's foolish. I mean, you could be right, but I think it's a foolish way. I think you do want that. You don't want the government, I guess, to continue growing in size, but you want the economy to keep growing in size, right?
Of course you do, yeah.
And so obviously there's going to have to be some government growth just in reflection to as the country grows.
Right. Yeah. If your city doubles in population and you're not doubling your cops, that's going to not be so wise.
Right.
So I think that's a distinction that both the left and the right are not nearly fucking specific enough when they're talking about the size of the government.
I agree.
I am okay with the government spending more money on the same programs that we already have potentially in a perfect world where I don't think the government's wasting our fucking money. I am okay with that. What I don't like is them adding new things and yet more new things and yet more new things that were
Right.
never in their purview in the first place. You know, and I guess like that's something that between the left and the right is always talked immediately past is, are we growing the scope of the government, or are we growing just how powerfully they do these few things? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it makes perfect sense.
Well, the
But-
scope of the government changes by the environment. Go ahead, Sitch.
Right. Well, I was just say, I mean, I think so much of this, I mean, yeah, some of this is just intuitive. People don't like the idea of this kind of nebulous organization perceived to be taking your money, and no one really sees or understands how exactly it's spent. And I think a lot of this conversation would be very different if people just had a transparent view of understanding and having faith in, how the government spends money. I think a lot of these conversations would not be occurring if people had faith in that process.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is like the problem of the war on terror thing, because like nobody knows about the terrorist plots that are stifled.
that get foiled.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Well, but
that
I mean, like,
cost
that's,
money
I think,
to do that shit.
I think that's why in a lot of these European countries, they have a lot, and this obviously can lead to downsides in many ways, but they're far more faith. They have a lot more faith in their governments providing these services because they're much smaller countries or whatever. They actually feel like they're seeing some direct result of their tax money. Where in America, a lot of people just have the sensation or perception that they're throwing their money into a pit and no one knows what the fuck happens to that.
Yeah, this is why universal healthcare probably goes a long way towards making people feel that their tax dollars are actually going to something. But I don't know. A lot of these
they wouldn't
people-
trust it in the first place, which is
I was gonna say, yeah, like freaking. I mean, you could say that as like an end result. Like you see going to a healthcare practitioner, and you see a direct result of your tax, quote unquote, your tax money.
right.
But at the same time, like you don't know the black hole to where all this money is actually going to. Like you don't actually see the money getting spent. You just see some type of end result. Hopefully, I mean, you would imagine a better one than what we're currently living with in our current healthcare system. But I mean, I don't even think that's a guarantee.
Okay.
I'm trying to give the best faith argument possible to your guys' side.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. BP for 25 Canadian. Thanks so much. Says first super chat ever. Thank you. What's the best way to support you guys? Subscribe star, Patreon, YouTube. Also, is there a Discord? Love the content. There's 2 Discords.
I think I'm gonna convert. We're gonna set up a Patreon. We have a
I think we're gonna set up a
Subscribe star,
Patreon. There we do have 2 Discords. CT can link one, someone can link the other. That you can join. They're all unofficial. In terms of best supporting us financially, is either through super chats or probably right now through the join channel feature. And we'll set up. We have a subscribe star, but I think we're gonna move to a Patreon for the channel. So
Yeah.
So there you go. But thank you so much, BP. Drew Cox for $10 says the gripe is all the inflammatory control mechanisms are controlled by the government. That's the inflationary control mechanism. But is there? I think is what Adam said in the beginning of the conversation. There's no other way to do it, because if there is no central control trying to tamp down inflation, then inflation will naturally spiral out of control, right?
If you completely privatize,
or deflation. I'm sorry, deflation.
Either one.
If you completely privatize the money supply, you would have it not tied to the government. But then again, that comes with its own risk.
But why? To me, that's so much more sus. Like, why the fuck would I trust some private entity to manage this over the government?
Yeah, and the thing that you're after is price stability. So are you going to a private corporate? I guess this is the Federal Reserve, which is in charge of price stability, is technically a private bank. But
it's a private public entity.
Right. It's this quasi.
Right.
Yes.
And so, because if it's purely private, then why would they would be motivated to just make money? Why they wouldn't be motivated to, act with any sort of a public good or to keep price stability or whatever?
They are not. Their charter is not to make money, I believe.
Yeah, but if it became 100% private entity,
it would be to make money. Yeah,
it would be to make money. So I don't know why anyone would trust that. Yeah. I wouldn't trust that.
Yeah, it's a
But,
weird situation.
It depends upon who you have more inherent trust in. Is it a private entity or is it government? And I mean, the private entity itself doesn't necessarily have to be a profit-driven business.
But the Austrians have faith in God because they're saying, well, no, they're literally saying that you don't need any entity focused on price stability.
I don't know if that's what they're saying or not. Like
I thought the
upon-
market is self-correcting.
Yeah, that's exactly
always
right.
Yeah.
Part of it is that the market is self-correcting, but part
Mhm.
of that also can be, instead of having a government regulation through the state, you can have independent regulations as a business, like regulatory entities as a business.
That's ESG.
That's ESG.
But really?
Yes. I mean, it's a big problem. All the ESG rating agencies are all private businesses, and there's no standard between any of them.
That's right. Yeah.
That's why they're calling for SEC involvement. I don't know. I feel like part of the problem with a lot of the Austrian economic model is it's basically like there's this expectation that there's going to be a magic government that all it does is enforce like libertarian principles and then nothing else. And it's like, oh, that's wonderful. It's not realistic, but that's wonderful, I guess.
The thing, I mean, I love my libertarian people, and like as far as where I point my ideological compass, it's always absolutely in that direction.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like realistically, even if you abolish the state will always reestablish itself. That's just always going to happen.
Because people are shitty and corrupt, and as the monarchists like to say, people will always choose order over chaos.
Eventually, a narcissist or a sociopath is going to get control of the largest gun on the playground.
Right. And that's why you need the government to prevent that from happening. Or to be the largest narcissist for the gun.
Yeah, the narcissist in narcissism we trust.
Right. That's what's kind of funny about our comic, actually, Adam, is that it's basically supervillains take over the world, and then they realize we have to become the government now.
Yeah. It spoils all the
that,
fun.
Realization of like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't as fun as I thought it would be. But cool. Okay.
Is that
Thanks
it?
for
Are we
coming,
done with
Mike.
super chats?
We're done with for
appreciate
super chats.
you guys having me on. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry if
good.
I wasn't more intense of a conversation, or I don't know. I'm
What do
not
you mean? This was great, Mike. This was awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm happy I had a good time. I was trying to be as like understanding as possible. The whole blood sports thing gets fucking irritating. And even beyond that, like I'm not a professional news or economics guy.
Mhm.
I kind of pick all this stuff up, and I mean, fucking, I'll be honest, I work a lot off of intuition as well. But
we all do. We pretend we don't, but we do.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it was really cool to at least, well, first of all, to talk to you guys. I've been a fan for a while.
Thank you.
But also to kind of air out some of the thoughts I've been having, because I don't know many people who talk about MMT. And frankly, like you were talking about, Adam, with all them being so fucking left leaning, I don't know how much I trust them.
Right.
You know, I know you guys are Team Truth, and like that's one of the reasons why I watch so much. So fucking like appreciate you having me on and trying to elaborate some of these crazy MMT thoughts I've been having.
Thanks.
Yeah,
No,
cool.
it was great conversation. Glad to have you, Mike. We put Mike's channel in the description, so everyone click it, subscribe to the channel, become the knight.
Appreciate you, boys.
Take care, man.
Yo, you too. Peace, guys.
Peace.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.